Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. My name is Cole Barrett. I've been doing this job for 23 years, and most of the cases I've seen have ended up reaching some kind of logical conclusion. Some weren't easy, some took a long time, but we always drew a line from point A to point B. There was a beginning, there was an end. Something happened in between, we connected the dots, and we closed the case. But this case is different. I first saw this file in 2003, when I was a younger detective who had just transferred to the cold case unit. My supervisor, Lieutenant Patterson, dropped a cardboard box on my desk. Inside were old files, photographs, evidence bags, and audio recordings. "This one's for you," he said. "Transferred from Portland 6 years ago. Nobody wanted to touch it." "Why not?" I asked. He smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. "You'll see when you read it," he said. Then he walked away. I opened the box that afternoon. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not decay or anything organic, just old paper and that particular mustiness that comes from evidence that's been sitting in storage for too long. The main file was thick, maybe 2 inches of reports, witness statements, crime scene photos, lab results. The case number was stamped on the front, 97-2841-HC. The victim's name was Michael Hartley, age 34, found dead in his home on November 18, 1997, in a small town called Millbrook, about 40 miles east of Portland. Single gunshot wound to the chest. No forced entry. No signs of struggle. No murder weapon recovered. On the surface, it looked like a standard homicide. Someone walked into Hartley's house, shot him, and left. Happens all the time, right? Except nothing about this case was standard. I started with the initial responding officer's report. It was written by a patrol officer named Davis, badge number 2847. His handwriting was neat, almost too neat, like he'd written it very carefully. The report stated that on November 18, 1997, at approximately 11:47 p.m., Officer Davis received a call from dispatch about a possible disturbance at 4156 Maple Drive. The caller was a neighbor, Mrs. Ellen Pritchard, who lived 3 houses down. She reported hearing what sounded like a loud bang, possibly a gunshot, followed by complete silence. Officer Davis arrived at the scene at 11:53 p.m. He noted that the front door was closed but unlocked. He knocked and announced himself. No response. He entered the residence. The house was dark except for a single lamp in the living room. The television was on, playing what Davis described as static, no channel. Michael Hartley was sitting in an armchair facing the TV. He was dressed in jeans and a white t-shirt. There was a small, dark stain on the front of his shirt, centered over his heart. Officer Davis approached and checked for a pulse. There was none. Hartley's skin was still warm. Davis immediately called for backup and secured the scene. That's where the file should have been straightforward. A man shot in his own home, door unlocked, no signs of forced entry. Usually that points to someone the victim knew. You start looking at friends, family, recent conflicts, financial records. You build a profile and work from there. But the detectives who worked this case in 1997 found something that didn't fit. I pulled out the crime scene photographs. There were dozens of them, taken from every angle. Hartley in the chair. The TV playing static. The lamp on the side table, the front door, the windows, the kitchen, the bedroom. Every room in the house photographed in meticulous detail. What struck me immediately was how clean everything was. Not clean as in recently tidied up, but clean as in untouched. There were no overturned furniture, no scattered belongings, no indication that anything unusual had happened. The only thing out of place was Michael Hartley, dead in his chair. The autopsy report was next. I've read hundreds of these, and they all follow the same format: clinical, precise, detached. The medical examiner, Dr. Raymond Foster, determined that the cause of death was a single gunshot wound to the chest. The bullet had entered just below the sternum, traveled upward at a slight angle, and lodged in the right ventricle of the heart. Death would have been nearly instantaneous. Time of death was estimated between 11:30 p.m. and 11:45 p.m., which matched the neighbor's report of hearing the gunshot at approximately 11:40 p.m. The bullet was a .38 caliber standard ammunition. It was recovered during the autopsy and sent to ballistics. No match in the database. The gun had never been used in any other crime on record, at least not any crime where the bullet was recovered. Here's where it started to get strange. The entry wound was clean, almost surgical. There was minimal tearing of the fabric on Hartley's shirt, and the wound itself showed no signs of close-range discharge. No powder burns, no stippling, no scorching. According to the ballistics report, the shot was fired from at least 6 feet away, possibly more. But here's the thing. If someone shoots you from 6 feet away, you react, you move, you flinch, you try to get away. Even if you're sitting down, even if you're surprised, your body does something. You don't just sit there and take it. Michael Hartley sat there and took it. The crime scene investigators found no defensive wounds on his hands, no signs that he had tried to stand up or turn away. His hands were resting on the armrests of the chair, fingers curled slightly inward, relaxed. His eyes were open, staring at the television. One of the detectives, a guy named Whitman, had written in his notes, "Victim appears to have been completely unaware of shooter's presence or did not perceive shooter as a threat." I flipped through more photographs. The living room from different angles, close-ups of the chair, the body, the television, and then I found something that made me stop. There was a photograph of the floor around Hartley's chair. The carpet was beige, slightly worn, and there, in the carpet, were footprints. Not shoe prints, but the compressed indentations left when someone stands in one spot for a period of time. The forensics team had marked them with little yellow tags. There were 2 sets of indentations. One set was where Hartley had been sitting, his feet resting naturally on the floor in front of the chair. The other set was directly behind the chair. Someone had been standing behind Michael Hartley. Not next to him, not across from him. Directly behind him, close enough that their feet left marks in the carpet. And they had stood there for a while. The indentations were deep, suggesting the person had been there for at least several minutes, possibly longer. I looked at the angle of the bullet wound again. Entered below the sternum, traveled upward. If someone is standing behind you and shoots you in the chest, the bullet would travel downward, not upward, unless the shooter was significantly shorter than the victim, which seemed unlikely given that Hartley was only 5'9". But if the shooter had been standing in front of Hartley, the footprints behind the chair made no sense. I read Detective Whitman's notes again. He had interviewed the neighbor, Mrs. Pritchard, the one who called 911. She said she heard a loud bang around 11:40 p.m. and immediately knew it was a gunshot. She had called the police right away. "Did you hear anything else?" Whitman had asked her. "Any shouting? Any arguing? Any doors slamming?" "No," Mrs. Pritchard said. "Just the one bang, and then nothing." "Did you see anyone leaving the house?" "No. I was in my living room watching TV. I heard the bang, I called you folks, and I stayed inside until the police arrived." Whitman had also interviewed the neighbors on the other side. Nobody saw anything. Nobody heard anything except the gunshot. Nobody saw anyone enter or leave the house. The only other person interviewed was Hartley's ex-wife, Jennifer Hartley. They had divorced 2 years earlier in 1995. The divorce had been amicable, according to Jennifer. No restraining orders, no custody battles. They didn't have children. They had simply grown apart and decided to separate. "When was the last time you spoke to Michael?" Whitman asked her. "About a week ago," Jennifer said. "He called to ask if I wanted some old furniture he was getting rid of. We talked for maybe 5 minutes. He seemed fine." "Did he mention anyone bothering him? Any problems at work? Any conflicts with anyone?" "No, Michael was a quiet person. He kept to himself. He worked as an accountant, did his job, came home. He wasn't the type to get into fights or make enemies." "What about friends? Did he have anyone close to him?" Jennifer paused. In the transcript, Whitman noted that she seemed to be thinking carefully about her answer. "Not really," she finally said. "Michael was always kind of a loner. Even when we were married, he didn't have many friends. There was a guy from work he played chess with sometimes, but I don't think they were close. Michael liked being alone. He said people made him tired." Whitman asked her if she knew of anyone who might want to hurt Michael. She said no. He asked if Michael had been acting strange lately, if he had mentioned anything unusual. She said no, he had seemed perfectly normal the last time they spoke. And that was it. No motive, no suspects, no leads. I pulled out the forensics report. The crime scene team had gone over every inch of that house. They lifted fingerprints from the doorknobs, the light switches, the furniture. All of them belonged to Michael Hartley. They found no foreign DNA, no hair fibers, no trace evidence of any other person being in that house, except for those footprints behind the chair. The team had measured them, photographed them, analyzed them. The prints indicated a shoe size approximately 10 to 11 in men's. The weight distribution suggested someone between 170 and 190 pounds. But there were no actual shoe prints, no tread pattern, nothing that could identify the specific shoe or the person wearing it. Just the impression that someone had been standing there. I looked at the photographs again. Michael Hartley in his chair, eyes open, staring at the television playing static. The small dark stain on his white shirt. The lamp casting a warm glow over the scene. And then I noticed something else. Something small, but it bothered me. In every photograph of the body, Hartley's hands were in the same position. Resting on the armrests, fingers curled slightly. Natural, relaxed. But in one of the close-up photos, I could see his right hand more clearly. His index finger was extended slightly, pointing toward the television. It could have been nothing, a random muscle contraction, a coincidence. But something about it felt deliberate, like he had been pointing at something. I set the file aside and rubbed my eyes. It was getting late, and I had been reading for hours. The office was quiet. Most of the other detectives had gone home. I looked at the evidence box, still half full of materials I hadn't reviewed yet. Lieutenant Patterson had been right. Nobody wanted to touch this case. And now I understood why. Because nothing about it made sense. I spent the next 3 days going through every piece of evidence in that box. Audio recordings of the 911 call, witness statements, follow-up reports, lab results. I made timelines, I made lists, I made diagrams. I tried to find the one piece that would make everything click into place. It never came. The 911 call from Mrs. Pritchard was straightforward. Her voice was shaky but clear. She told the dispatcher she heard what sounded like a gunshot from a house down the street. She gave the address. The dispatcher asked if she saw anyone leaving the house. She said no. The call lasted 1 minute and 47 seconds. I listened to it 3 times. There was nothing unusual about it. Just a concerned neighbor reporting what she heard. The follow-up investigation had been thorough. The detectives had canvassed the entire neighborhood, interviewed everyone on Maple Drive and the surrounding streets. Nobody saw anything suspicious. Nobody heard anything except the gunshot. One neighbor, a man named Robert Chen, who lived 2 houses down from Hartley, mentioned that he had seen Hartley earlier that evening, around 7 p.m., bringing in groceries from his car. Hartley had waved to him. Chen waved back. That was the extent of their interaction. "Did he seem normal?" Detective Whitman had asked. "Yeah, completely normal," Chen said. He was carrying 2 bags, walking at a normal pace. Nothing seemed off. Another neighbor, a woman named Patricia Delgado, said she had driven past Hartley's house around 10 p.m. and noticed that his living room light was on. She didn't think anything of it at the time. The detectives had also checked Hartley's phone records. He had made 3 calls in the week before his death. 1 to his ex-wife Jennifer about the furniture. 1 to his dentist to schedule an appointment. 1 to a pizza place to order delivery. The pizza had been delivered at 8:15 p.m. on the night of his death. The delivery driver, a college student named Marcus Webb, said Hartley answered the door, paid in cash, tipped $5, and thanked him. Webb said Hartley seemed fine, maybe a little quiet, but not unusual. "Did you notice anyone else at the house?" Whitman asked. "No, just him. The TV was on in the living room. I could hear it from the door." "What was on TV?" Webb shrugged. "I don't know. I didn't pay attention. Some show." The pizza box had been found in the kitchen, empty except for 2 slices. Hartley had eaten dinner, watched TV, and at some point between 10 p.m. and 11:40 p.m., someone had shot him. I turned my attention to Hartley's background. The file included a summary of his life, compiled by the original investigators. Michael Hartley was born in 1963 in Eugene, Oregon. His parents, both deceased by 1997, had been school teachers. Hartley had one sister, Linda, who lived in Seattle. He had graduated from the University of Oregon with a degree in accounting and had worked for the same firm, Preston and Associates, for 12 years. His co-workers described him as quiet, reliable, and competent. He always met his deadlines, never caused problems, never complained. He wasn't social, but he wasn't unfriendly either. He just kept to himself. "Did he have any enemies at work?" Whitman asked Hartley's supervisor, a man named Gerald Preston. "Enemies? No, absolutely not. Michael was the last person who would make enemies. He barely spoke to anyone outside of work-related matters. Any recent conflicts? Any disputes over projects or clients? Nothing. Michael handled corporate tax returns. It's not exactly the kind of work that creates drama." Hartley's financial records showed nothing unusual. He earned a modest salary, paid his bills on time, had no significant debts. His bank account showed regular deposits from his paycheck and occasional withdrawals for living expenses. No large transactions, no unexplained transfers. His medical records were equally unremarkable. He saw his doctor once a year for a routine checkup. He wasn't on any medications. He had no history of mental illness, no hospitalizations, no chronic conditions. By all accounts, Michael Hartley was an ordinary person living an ordinary life. And then someone walked into his house and shot him. I started looking at the crime scene from a different angle. The house itself was a small, 2-bedroom ranch-style home built in the 1970s. Hartley had bought it in '95, shortly after his divorce. It was located on a quiet street in a middle-class neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but well-maintained. The layout was simple. Front door opened into a small entryway. Living room to the right, kitchen straight ahead, Hallway to the left, leading to 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. The living room had one window facing the street and one facing the backyard. Both windows had been locked from the inside on the night of the murder. The back door, which led from the kitchen to a small patio, had also been locked from the inside. The only unlocked door was the front door. I studied the crime scene photos of the front door. It was a standard wooden door with a deadbolt and a regular lock. Both had been in the unlocked position when Officer Davis arrived. The question that kept nagging at me was, how did the killer get in? If the door was unlocked, maybe Hartley let them in. But if Hartley knew his killer well enough to let them in, why did he end up dead with no signs of struggle or conflict? And if the killer had a key, where did they get it? Jennifer Hartley, the ex-wife, said she had given her key back to Michael after the divorce. The only other person who might have had a key was Hartley's sister Linda, but she lived 3 hours away in Seattle and had an alibi for the night of the murder. She had been at a work event with dozens of witnesses. Maybe Hartley had left the door unlocked by accident. People forget to lock their doors all the time. But everyone who knew Hartley described him as meticulous, careful, someone who followed routines. It seemed unlikely that he would forget something like that. I kept coming back to those footprints behind the chair. Someone had been standing there, standing behind Michael Hartley while he sat in his chair watching television, standing there for several minutes. And then they shot him. But why? And how did Hartley not notice someone standing right behind him? I pulled out the photographs of the living room again and studied them carefully. The chair Hartley had been sitting in was positioned about 8 feet from the television. The back of the chair faced the hallway that led to the bedrooms. Behind the chair, there was maybe 3 feet of space before you hit the wall. If someone was standing behind the chair, they would be clearly visible if you walked into the room from the front door. Officer Davis would have seen them immediately when he entered the house, but he didn't. The killer was gone by the time Davis arrived. I looked at the timestamp on the 911 call. Mrs. Pritchard called at 11:41 p.m. Officer Davis arrived at 11:53 p.m. That's 12 minutes. Plenty of time for someone to leave the house, get to a car, and drive away. But Mrs. Pritchard lived 3 houses down with a direct line of sight to Hartley's front door. If someone had left through the front door, she would have seen them when she looked out to see what was going on. She specifically said she didn't see anyone. What about the back door? It was locked from the inside. Could the killer have locked it and then left through the front? Possible. But again, why would Hartley have let someone in, only to have them walk around to stand behind his chair and shoot him? None of it made sense. I decided to visit the house. The file said it had been sold in '99 to a young couple. I called the current owners and explained that I was reviewing an old case. They agreed to let me take a look. The house was exactly as it appeared in the photographs, just with different furniture and a fresh coat of paint. The new owners, Mark and Rebecca Townsend, showed me around. "We knew someone had died here," Rebecca said. "The realtor told us. It was hard to sell for a while because of that, so we got a good price." "Have you had any problems with the house?" I asked. "Problems? Like what?" "Anything unusual? Strange sounds? Anything out of place?" Mark laughed. "You mean like, is it haunted? No, nothing like that. It's a normal house." I walked into the living room. The Townsends had arranged their furniture differently, but I could see where Hartley's chair had been. I stood in that spot and looked around. The television was in approximately the same place. I could see the front door from where I stood. I could see the hallway. I walked behind where the chair had been and stood there, in the spot where the killer had stood. From this position, I could see Hartley's chair, the TV, the front door, the hallway. If I looked down, I could see the back of Hartley's head if he were sitting there. I stood there for a full minute, just feeling the space, trying to imagine what had happened that night. Rebecca watched me with a concerned expression. "Is everything okay?" "Yes," I said, "just trying to understand something." On my way out, I noticed something I hadn't seen in the photographs. The hallway that led to the bedrooms had a small closet near the entrance. I asked the Townsends if it had been there in 1997. "As far as we know," Mark said, "we haven't changed anything structural." I made a note of it. Then I thanked them and left. Back at the office, I pulled up the crime scene video. The original investigators had filmed a walkthrough of the house on the night of the murder. I watched it 3 times, paying special attention to that hallway closet. The closet door was closed in the video. Nobody had opened it during the initial search of the house. I found the inventory list from the crime scene investigation. Every item in the house had been cataloged. I scanned through the list until I found the entry for the hallway closet. Winter coats, 3, vacuum cleaner, cleaning supplies. Nothing unusual. I sat back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. Something about this case felt wrong on a fundamental level. Not just the lack of evidence or the mysterious footprints. Something deeper. I started reading through the witness statements again, this time looking for anything that might have been overlooked. And that's when I found it. Detective Whitman had interviewed Hartley's co-worker, the one he played chess with. His name was Dennis Moore. The interview had been brief, just a few questions about whether Hartley had any enemies or seemed troubled. But there was one exchange that caught my attention. Whitman: "When was the last time you saw Michael?" Moore: "Friday afternoon, before the weekend. We were supposed to play chess that Sunday, but he called and canceled." Whitman: "Did he say why?" Moore: "He said something came up. He sounded distracted." Whitman: "Distracted how?" Moore: "I don't know, just not himself. Usually Michael was very precise when he spoke. That day he seemed like his mind was somewhere else." Whitman: "Did he mention what came up?" Moore: "No, I asked, but he just said he'd explain later. He never did." The interview had ended there. Whitman had thanked Moore and moved on. But here's the thing. That Sunday when Hartley canceled on Moore was November 16, 1997, 2 days before the murder. Something had come up. Something that distracted Michael Hartley enough that his co-worker noticed. Something Hartley didn't want to explain over the phone. I looked through the rest of the file for any follow-up on this. There was none. It seemed like a small detail at the time, easily overlooked in the bigger picture of the investigation. But now, 6 years later, reading through everything with fresh eyes, it felt significant. I made a note to try to track down Dennis Moore and ask him more about that phone call. Then I kept reading. The ballistics report had been thorough. The bullet recovered from Hartley's body was a .38 Special, a common round used in revolvers. The rifling marks suggested it had been fired from a Smith & Wesson or similar manufacturer, but without the gun, there was no way to make a definitive match. The interesting thing was that .38 revolvers don't eject shell casings. The casings stay in the cylinder until the shooter manually removes them. This meant that if the killer had fired the gun and left, they took the casing with them. Either that, or they reloaded after firing, which seemed unlikely. But why would someone take the time to remove the shell casing? In the heat of the moment, right after committing a murder, most people would just run. They wouldn't think about brass casings, unless they were very careful. Unless they had planned this. I was starting to form a picture in my mind. Not a complete picture, but the outline of one. Someone who planned carefully. Someone who knew Michael Hartley well enough to get into his house. Someone who stood behind him for several minutes before shooting him. Someone who left no trace, no evidence, no witnesses. But who and why? I kept reading. The next section of the file contained the analysis of the television. The forensics team had examined it to see if there was anything unusual about the static it was playing when Officer Davis arrived. According to the report, the TV was tuned to Channel 47, which was not broadcasting at that time of night. The station had signed off at midnight, but Hartley had been killed before then, around 11:40. So at the time of death, there should have been programming on that channel. The team had checked the TV guide for November 18, 1997. Channel 47 was supposed to be showing a late-night movie at 11:30. Instead, it was playing static. One of the technicians had noted, "TV appears to have been manually tuned to static, or the broadcast was interrupted before the victim's death." I found that interesting. If Hartley had been watching TV when he was killed, why would the TV be showing static? Had someone changed the channel after shooting him? But why would they do that? Or had the TV been on static the whole time, and Hartley had just been sitting there staring at it? I made another note. Check with the television station if there were any broadcast interruptions that night. The more I read, the more questions I had, and none of them had good answers. It took me 2 weeks to track down Dennis Moore. He had left Preston and Associates in 1999 and moved to California. I finally reached him by phone at his new job in Sacramento. "Mr. Moore, my name is Detective Cole Barrett. I'm with the Cascade County Sheriff's Department. I'm reviewing the Michael Hartley case from 1997. There was a long pause on the other end. "That was a long time ago," Moore finally said. "I know. I'm sorry to bring it up. I just have a few questions about Michael. You knew him pretty well, right?" "Well enough. We worked together, played chess sometimes. I wouldn't say we were close friends, but we got along. I read the statement you gave back in 97. You mentioned that Michael called you 2 days before his death and canceled your chess game. You said he sounded distracted." "Yeah, I remember that." "Can you tell me more about that conversation? Anything he said? Anything that stuck with you?" Moore was quiet for a moment. I could hear him breathing, thinking. "It was strange," he finally said. "Michael was always very precise. He chose his words carefully, but that day when he called, he kept pausing, like he was listening to something or thinking about something else while he was talking to me." "Did he mention what came up?" "No. I asked, but he just said something came up, and he'd tell me later. I figured it was family stuff or something personal. Michael didn't talk much about his personal life. Did he sound scared, worried?" "Not scared, more like preoccupied, like his mind was somewhere else." "And you never found out what it was?" "No, I didn't think much of it at the time, and then 2 days later, he was dead." I thanked Moore and hung up. Then I sat at my desk, staring at my notes. Something came up, something that distracted Michael Hartley 2 days before someone shot him in his own home. Something he didn't want to explain over the phone. I decided to dig deeper into those 2 days. What did Hartley do between November 16th, when he canceled on Moore, and November 18th, when he died? The file included Hartley's work schedule. He had called in sick on Monday, November 17th. His supervisor, Gerald Preston, confirmed this in his statement. Hartley had called early in the morning and said he wasn't feeling well, that he needed a day to rest. "Was that unusual?" Detective Whitman had asked. "Very unusual," Preston said. "Michael never called in sick. In 12 years, I can count on one hand the number of times he took a sick day." So Hartley had spent Monday at home. Doing what? I checked his phone records again. On November 17th, he made one call. It was to a number in Portland, lasted 4 minutes, placed at 2:13 p.m. I traced the number. It belonged to a psychiatrist's office. I called the office. The receptionist who answered was new and didn't have access to old records. I explained that I was investigating a death and needed to know if Michael Hartley had been a patient there in 97. "I'll have to check with the doctor," she said. "Can you call back tomorrow?" I called back the next day. The doctor, a woman named Dr. Lisa Vaughn, came on the line. "Detective Barrett," she said. "I remember Michael Hartley. He came to see me once in November 1997. I can't discuss the details of our session without a subpoena, but I can confirm he was here." "When did he come in?" "November 17th. It was an emergency appointment. He called that morning and said he needed to talk to someone right away. I had a cancellation, so I fit him in at 2:30. "Did he seem distressed?" "I really can't discuss the session," Dr. Vaughn said. "But I will tell you this. After he left, I made a note in his file that I was concerned about him. I recommended a follow-up appointment. He never called back." "What were you concerned about?" "I'm sorry, Detective. I need a subpoena for that." I thanked her and hung up. Then I immediately started the paperwork to get that subpoena. It took 3 days. When the subpoena came through, I went to Portland and met with Dr. Vaughn in person. She was in her 50s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. She pulled Hartley's file and invited me to sit down. "Before we start," she said, "I want you to understand that what Michael told me that day has stayed with me. It was one of the most unusual sessions I've ever had." "Unusual how?" She opened the file and read from her notes. "Michael came in on November 17th at 2:30 p.m. He was agitated, which was apparently out of character for him. He told me he needed to talk to someone because he didn't know if what he was experiencing was real." "What was he experiencing?" Dr. Vaughn looked at me. "He said that for the past 3 nights, he had been waking up at exactly 3:17 a.m. Each time he would wake up suddenly, completely alert, and he would have the feeling that someone was in his house." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Did he see someone?" "No. That's what made it so disturbing to him. He would wake up, he would feel absolutely certain that someone was there, but when he turned on the lights and checked, he was always alone. Nothing was out of place. Nothing was missing. No signs of anyone having been there." "Did he think he was dreaming?" "That's what he asked me. He wanted to know if it could be sleep paralysis or some kind of anxiety disorder. I asked him if he was under any particular stress, and he said no. His life was stable, his work was fine, he had no major problems. But he couldn't shake the feeling that these episodes meant something." "What did you tell him?" "I told him it could be anxiety manifesting as a sleep disturbance. I recommended he keep a journal, track his sleep patterns, maybe see a sleep specialist. I also prescribed a mild anti-anxiety medication if he wanted to try it." "Did he take the medication?" "I don't know. He took the prescription, but I never saw him again." Dr. Vaughn closed the file. "There was one more thing," she said. "At the end of the session, Michael asked me something strange. He asked if it was possible for someone to know when they were being watched, even if they couldn't see the person watching them." "What did you say?" "I told him that some people are more attuned to their environment than others, that it's not uncommon to sense when you're being observed. But I also told him that if he was experiencing persistent paranoia, we should explore that further." "How did he react?" "He stood up to leave. And then he turned back and said, 'What if it's not paranoia? What if someone really is there and they're just very good at hiding?'" I sat in silence, processing this. Michael Hartley had spent the last days of his life feeling like he was being watched. 3 nights in a row, he woke up at 3:17 a.m. with the certainty that someone was in his house. And then, on the 4th night, someone shot him. I thanked Dr. Vaughn and drove back to Cascade County. My mind was racing the entire way. When I got back to the office, I pulled out the crime scene photos again. This time, I was looking for something specific. I found it in a photograph of Hartley's bedroom. On the nightstand, next to the bed, there was a notepad and a pen. The forensics team had photographed it but hadn't collected it as evidence because it appeared to be blank. But when I looked closer, I could see indentations on the top page. Someone had written on the page above and torn it off, leaving impressions. I called the evidence room and asked if they still had that notepad. They did. I requested it be sent up for analysis. 2 days later, the lab called me. They had used electrostatic detection to reveal what had been written on the missing page. It was a list of times, 3:17 a.m., Nov 14, 3:17 a.m., Nov 15, 3:17 a.m., and Nov 16, and below that, a single sentence, "Someone is here." I stared at the enhanced image. Hartley had been documenting his experiences. He had woken up at 3:17 a.m. 3 nights in a row, and each time, he felt someone was in his house. But here's what bothered me. The list ended on November 16th. Hartley was killed on November 18th. What happened on November 17th? Did he wake up at 3:17 a.m. that night too? And if so, why didn't he add it to the list? I checked the autopsy report for any mention of medication in Hartley's system. There was none. So either he hadn't filled the prescription Dr. Vaughn gave him, or he hadn't taken it yet. I started building a new timeline. November 14th. Hartley wakes at 3:17 a.m., feels someone in the house November 15th. Hartley wakes at 3:17 a.m., feels someone in the house November 16th. Hartley wakes at 3:17 a.m., feels someone in the house. Later that day, he cancels his chess game with Dennis Moore. November 17th. Hartley calls in sick to work. He sees Dr. Vaughn at 2:30 p.m. November 18th. Hartley is found dead in his home at 11:47 p.m. Something had escalated. After 3 nights of waking up at 3:17 a.m., Hartley had become worried enough to seek professional help. He had taken a sick day to see a psychiatrist. He had asked if it was possible for someone to know when they're being watched, and then, the next day, he was dead. I went back to the crime scene photos. This time, I was looking at Hartley's bedroom. The bed was neatly made, the room was tidy, nothing out of place. But there was something on the floor, barely visible in one of the photos. I had missed it before because it was small and in a shadowy corner of the room. I zoomed in on the image as much as I could. It looked like a small piece of paper or fabric. I called the evidence room again. "Do you have a piece of paper or fabric collected from the bedroom?" They checked. "No, nothing like that in the bedroom inventory." "Can you check the vacuum cleaner, the one that was in the hallway closet?" There was a pause. "We didn't process the vacuum cleaner. It wasn't flagged as relevant." "Is it still in storage?" "Should be. Let me check." They found it. The vacuum cleaner had been sitting in the evidence storage for 6 years, untouched. They brought it up and carefully emptied the bag. Inside, among the dust and dirt and regular debris, they found 3 things. A small piece of paper, folded multiple times until it was the size of a thumbnail. Several strands of hair that didn't match Michael Hartley's a button. Black, small. Possibly from a coat I put on gloves and carefully unfolded the paper. It was a page torn from a small notebook. On it, in handwriting that wasn't Hartley's, was written a single word: soon. I sent the hair and the button to the lab for DNA analysis. The results came back a week later. The hair contained DNA that didn't match anyone in the database. The button had no recoverable DNA, but the handwriting on the note could be analyzed. I sent it to a document examiner, along with samples of Hartley's own handwriting for comparison. The examiner confirmed what I already knew. The handwriting wasn't Hartley's. It belonged to someone else. Someone who had been in his house. Someone who had left him a note. Soon. I sat at my desk staring at that single word. Someone had been in Michael Hartley's house before he died. They had left him a note. Not a threatening note, not an obvious warning. Just one word: soon. And Hartley had found it. He must have found it on one of those nights when he woke up at 3:17 a.m. He had found it, and instead of showing it to the police, he had torn it up and vacuumed it. Why? Why would he do that? Unless he didn't believe it was real. Unless he thought he was losing his mind, imagining things, creating evidence of his own paranoia. That's why he went to see Dr. Vaughn. He needed someone to tell him he wasn't crazy. But he wasn't crazy. Someone really had been in his house. Someone who could get in and out without leaving evidence. Someone who could stand in his bedroom while he slept and leave a note for him to find. Someone who was very good at hiding. I looked at the footprints behind the chair again. In the final crime scene photos, you could see them clearly. Deep impressions in the carpet, indicating someone had stood there for a significant amount of time. How long had they stood there? 5 minutes? 10? Longer? And what were they doing? Watching Hartley watch television. Waiting for the right moment? I tried to imagine it. Michael Hartley sitting in his chair, watching TV or maybe just staring at static. Behind him, inches away, someone stands silently, waiting. Hartley must have felt it. After 3 nights of waking up with the certainty that someone was in his house, he must have been hyper-aware of his surroundings. He must have been listening for every creak, every shift in the air. So how did he not know someone was right behind him? I went back to the house. The Townsends let me in again, probably thinking I was a little obsessed at this point. Maybe I was. I stood in the living room, in the spot where Hartley's chair had been. I asked Rebecca if she would stand behind me, just to help me test something. She did. I sat down in a chair they had in a similar position. Rebecca stood behind me, about 3 feet back. "Can you hear me breathing?" I asked. "No," she said. "Can you feel me standing here?" "I don't know. Maybe. It's hard to say." I told her to take a step closer. She did. "Now can you feel me?" "Maybe a little. I think if I wasn't expecting you, I wouldn't notice." I told her to take one more step. She was now directly behind me, close enough that if she leaned forward, she could touch my head. "Now?" I asked. "Yeah, now I can definitely tell you're there." But the footprints had been 3 feet behind the chair, not right up against it. From that distance, if you're absorbed in something, if you're tired or distracted, you might not notice someone standing behind you. But for several minutes, without moving, without making a sound, I thanked Rebecca and left. Back at the office, I reviewed everything again. The timeline, the evidence, the witness statements. I was looking for something I had missed, some detail that would explain how this had happened. And then I found it. Or rather, I found the absence of something. In all the crime scene photos and all the documentation, there was no mention of Hartley's shoes. I went through the inventory list. Victim wearing jeans, white t-shirt, socks. No shoes. I looked at the photos of Hartley in the chair. His feet were on the floor, wearing white socks. No shoes. Where were his shoes? I called the evidence room. Was a pair of shoes collected from the Hartley house? They checked. Yes, a pair of running shoes, found by the back door in the kitchen. By the back door? Like he had just come in from outside? That's what it looks like. But Hartley had been killed in the evening, after eating pizza at 8:15 p.m. Had he gone outside after that? And if so, why? I requested the shoes. When they arrived, I examined them carefully. They were Nike running shoes, size 9, well worn but clean. I checked the soles. They were wet. Not soaking wet, but damp, like they had been exposed to moisture and hadn't fully dried yet. November 18th, 1997, had been a dry night in Cascade County. No rain, no snow. The weather report confirmed it. So, where had the moisture come from? I looked at the crime scene photos of the backyard. There was a small patio, a patch of lawn, and a fence separating Hartley's property from his neighbors. Nothing unusual. But in one of the photos, I noticed something. The grass in the backyard looked darker in one spot, like it was wetter than the surrounding area. I went back to the house for the third time. Mark and Rebecca Townsend were starting to look concerned. "Is everything all right?" Mark asked. "You keep coming back." "I'm just trying to piece together what happened," I said. "Can I look at your backyard?" They let me. The yard looked the same as it had in the photos, just with different landscaping. I walked around, looking for anything unusual, and then I saw it. In the corner of the yard, near the fence, there was a small area where the grass didn't grow as well as the rest. It was slightly sunken, like the ground beneath had settled. "Has this always been here?" I asked Mark. He looked at it. "Yeah, since we moved in. We figured it was just a soft spot in the ground or something." I knelt down and touched the grass. It was dry now, but the ground felt different from the rest of the yard. Softer, more compressed. I made a note to check if the original crime scene investigation had examined the backyard in detail. They hadn't. The backyard had been photographed, but not thoroughly searched. The focus had been on the house itself, on the body, on the living room where Hartley died. I requested a ground-penetrating radar scan of the backyard. It took 2 weeks to get approval and schedule the team. They found something. 3 feet below the surface in that corner of the yard where the grass didn't grow well, there was a void. Something that showed up on the scan as an empty space in the otherwise solid ground. We got a warrant to excavate. On a cold morning in March 2003, a team of forensic specialists carefully dug up that corner of the Townsends' backyard. 4 feet down, they found a metal box. It was about the size of a shoebox, sealed with electrical tape. We brought it back to the lab and opened it carefully, documenting everything. Inside was a collection of items, photographs of Michael Hartley's house, taken from various angles, photographs of Michael Hartley himself, clearly taken without his knowledge. He was at his car, at the grocery store, walking into his office. A schedule, handwritten, documenting Hartley's daily routine with precise times. A small notebook with entries spanning 3 weeks before Hartley's death. A key. The notebook entries were brief and cryptic. Anovia 1, pattern confirmed. Anov 7, access established. Anov 14, first contact, reaction, confusion. Anov 15, second contact, reaction, fear. Anov 16, third contact, reaction, seeking help. Anov 17, escalation necessary. And the final entry, dated November 18th, tonight. The handwriting matched the note that said, soon. The key fit Michael Hartley's front door. Someone had been stalking Hartley for weeks. They had photographed him, documented his routine, gained access to his house. They had been entering his home while he slept, waking him up at precisely 3:17 a.m., watching his reactions. And when Hartley sought help from a psychiatrist, when he started to understand that something was really wrong, they escalated. They killed him. But who? Who was they? The DNA from the hair found in Hartley's vacuum didn't match anyone in the database. The handwriting couldn't be attributed to anyone we knew. There were no fingerprints on the metal box or any of the items inside. We had evidence that someone had stalked and killed Michael Hartley, but we had no idea who. The investigation went cold again after that. We followed every lead we could find. We re-interviewed everyone who had known Hartley, looking for someone who might have had access to his house. someone who might have been obsessed with him. Nothing. We checked for similar cases in surrounding counties, looking for a pattern of home invasions or stalking that matched what happened to Hartley. Nothing. We even consulted with FBI behavioral analysts, hoping they could build a profile of someone who would do this kind of meticulous, patient stalking. They gave us theories, but no names. Years passed. The case file grew thicker with dead ends and negative results. Every few months I would pull it out and read through it again, hoping to see something new. In 2007, we got a hit on the DNA from the hair. A woman named Patricia Morrison had been arrested for burglary in California, and her DNA was added to the database. It was a partial match to the hair found in Hartley's house. Not a direct match, but close enough to indicate a familial relationship. I contacted the California police and spoke to Patricia Morrison. She was confused and cooperative. She said she had never been to Oregon, had never heard of Michael Hartley, didn't know anything about a murder. "Do you have any family members who might have been in Oregon in 1997? I asked. She thought about it. "My brother," she said, "David. But I haven't seen him in years. We had a falling out in the mid-90s. Where's David now?" "I don't know. Last I heard he was living somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, but that was over a decade ago. We haven't spoken since. Do you have a photo of him?" She sent me an old family photo from the early 1990s. David Morrison was a tall, thin man with dark hair and an intense gaze. He looked like he could have been in his early 30s in the photo. I ran David Morrison through every database we had. No criminal record, no driver's license, no employment history after 1995, no tax returns, no Social Security activity. It was like he had disappeared, or like he had never officially existed in the first place. I kept searching. I contacted police departments throughout Oregon and Washington, asking if anyone had heard of David Morrison. A few had seen the name in old reports. Minor things, trespassing, loitering, but nothing after 1996. In 2009, I received a call from a detective in Seattle. A homeless man had been found dead under a bridge. No ID, no belongings. But someone had recognized him from a missing persons poster I had circulated years earlier. It was David Morrison, or at least someone who looked like the man in Patricia's photo. The body had been there for weeks before anyone found it. The cause of death was exposure and malnutrition. There was no evidence of foul play. I went to Seattle to view the body. The resemblance to the photo was strong, but after weeks of decomposition, it was hard to be certain. We took DNA samples and sent them to the lab. The results came back. The DNA was a match to the hair found in Michael Hartley's vacuum cleaner. David Morrison had been in Hartley's house. David Morrison had left that note. David Morrison had stalked and presumably killed Michael Hartley. But David Morrison was dead, and with him died any chance of understanding why. I tried to find out more about Morrison's life. His sister Patricia said he had always been different, quiet, obsessive, prone to fixating on random people and things. Their parents had tried to get him help, but he had refused treatment. In his 20s, Morrison had drifted from place to place, never holding a job for long, never forming lasting relationships. Patricia lost touch with him in 1994 after he told her he had important work to do and stopped returning her calls. What was the important work? Why Michael Hartley? I went back through Hartley's life looking for any connection to David Morrison. I checked employment records, school records, mutual acquaintances. I found nothing. As far as I could tell, Hartley and Morrison had never met before Morrison began stalking him. It was random, or at least it appeared to be random. I never closed the case. Officially, it remains open because while we know who killed Michael Hartley, we don't know why. And we never will. But here's the thing that still bothers me. all these years later. The thing that makes me pull out this file late at night and read through it again, that metal box buried in the backyard. When did Morrison bury it? The entries in the notebook ended on November 18th, the night of the murder. So Morrison must have buried it either before killing Hartley or immediately after. But if Morrison buried it before the murder, that means he went to Hartley's house, dug a 4-foot hole in the backyard, buried the box, and then went inside to kill Hartley. And if he buried it after, that means he killed Hartley, then spent time in the backyard, digging a hole, burying evidence, while police sirens were approaching. Neither scenario makes complete sense, but there's a third possibility, one that I don't like to think about but I can't ignore. What if Morrison didn't bury the box? What if someone else did? The handwriting in the notebook matched the note that said soon, and the DNA matched Morrison, so Morrison definitely wrote those entries. But who took the notebook, along with all the photos and the schedule and the key, and buried them in Hartley's backyard? Morrison or someone else? I've never been able to answer that question. In 2015, 8 years after Morrison's body was found, I received a package at the police station. No return address, postmarked from Portland. Inside was a single photograph. It was a crime scene photo from the Hartley case. The one showing Michael Hartley in his chair, dead, staring at the television, but someone had drawn on it with a red pen, a single circle around Hartley's right hand, the one that had been pointing at the television, and written in the margin, in handwriting I didn't recognize. He knew. I sent the photograph to the lab for analysis. The handwriting didn't match David Morrison's. The envelope had no useful fingerprints or DNA. I tried to trace where the photo had come from. It was definitely one of ours, from the original crime scene investigation, but those photos should have been secured in our evidence room. I checked. They were all still there. Someone had made a copy. But who and when? The only people who had access to those photos were police personnel and the attorneys involved in the case. I interviewed everyone I could find who had worked on the case. Everyone denied sending the package. I don't know what "he knew" means. I don't know what Hartley knew, or what he was pointing at, or if he was pointing at anything at all. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe someone's idea of a sick joke. But I don't think so. I think someone out there knows more about what happened to Michael Hartley than they've ever said. Someone who had access to the case file. Someone who waited 18 years to send me that photograph. Someone who wanted me to know that this case isn't as closed as we think it is. Last month I pulled the file again. I do this every year now, usually around November. I sit in my office late at night when everyone else has gone home, and I read through the whole thing, looking for something I missed, some detail that will make it all make sense. I stare at that photograph of Hartley in his chair, his right index finger extended slightly toward the television, his eyes open, seeing nothing, the footprints behind the chair, the word "soon" on a tiny piece of paper. David Morrison, dead under a bridge. An anonymous package with a circled hand and 2 words, "He knew." 26 years have passed since Michael Hartley was killed. David Morrison has been dead for 16 years. Everyone involved in the original investigation has retired or moved on. But I can't move on, because somewhere in all of this, there's a truth we haven't found, a piece that would make everything fit. And I think Michael Hartley knew what it was. I think in those final moments, sitting in his chair, with someone standing behind him in the darkness, he understood. He figured out what was happening, what had been happening, what it all meant. And maybe that's why he didn't fight. Maybe that's why he just sat there, pointing at the static on his television, waiting for what came next. Because he knew. But we don't. and I'm starting to think we never will. The file is still in my office. Box number 972841 HC, unsolved. Unresolved. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I can feel someone standing behind me while I read it. Just a presence, a weight in the air, something watching over my shoulder. I tell myself it's nothing, just my imagination. Too many years on this case, too many hours staring at crime scene photos and evidence bags. But then I remember Michael Hartley, waking up at 3:17 a.m. 3 nights in a row, absolutely certain someone was in his house. And I wonder if he told himself the same thing, right up until the moment he was wrong. I'm Sarah Lawson, and I've worked missing persons for 11 years. Most cases follow a pattern. Someone doesn't come home, family gets worried, we start looking. Usually, they turn up within 48 hours. Sometimes they don't want to be found. Sometimes they're found somewhere they didn't want to be. But every once in a while you get a case that doesn't follow any pattern at all. A case where the more you learn, the less sense it makes, where every answer just creates more questions. This is one of those cases. Her name was Rebecca Ann Garrison, age 29. Worked as a librarian at the Clearwater County Public Library. Lived alone in a small apartment on Pine Street. No husband, no boyfriend, no children. Her parents lived in Boise, 2 hours away. By all accounts, she was quiet, reliable, and ordinary. On June 15, 2004, Rebecca Garrison disappeared. The case landed on my desk on June 17th, when Rebecca's supervisor at the library, a woman named Margaret Chen, filed a missing person report. Margaret said Rebecca hadn't shown up for work on June 16th, which was unusual because Rebecca never missed work without calling. When Margaret tried calling Rebecca's apartment and cell phone, there was no answer. Margaret had waited a day, hoping Rebecca would turn up or at least call with an explanation. When she didn't, Margaret got worried and contacted us. I drove to Rebecca's apartment that afternoon. It was a small, one-bedroom unit in an older building, nothing fancy but clean and well-maintained. The landlord, a man named Frank Delaney, let me in with his master key. "I haven't seen her since Monday," Frank said as he unlocked the door. "She usually says hello when I see her, but I haven't noticed her car in the parking lot either." "When on Monday?" I asked. "Evening, around 6 or 7. She was coming home from work. I was checking the mailboxes. We said hello. She went upstairs. Did she seem normal, upset, worried, anything unusual?" Frank shook his head. "Same as always. Polite, quiet. Nothing seemed wrong." The apartment was exactly what you'd expect from someone who worked at a library. Books everywhere. Tidy, organized, everything in its place. The bed was made, the dishes were done, the trash had been taken out. It looked like Rebecca had left for work in the morning and simply never came back. I checked her closet. Her work clothes were there, along with casual wear, shoes, a winter coat. Nothing seemed to be missing, though it was hard to tell without knowing exactly what she owned. Her suitcase was in the closet, not packed. Her toothbrush was in the bathroom. Her car keys were on the kitchen counter. That's what made me pause. Her car keys were there, but according to Frank, her car wasn't in the parking lot. I went back downstairs and walked through the parking lot with Frank. He pointed to an empty space near the building entrance. "That's where she always parks, space 14. Her car's not there." "What kind of car did she drive?" "A silver Honda Civic, maybe 5 or 6 years old. I don't know the exact year." I ran Rebecca's name through DMV records. She owned a '98 Honda Civic, silver. I put out a bolo for the vehicle and went back to the office to start making calls. Rebecca's parents, Thomas and Marie Garrison, drove up from Boise that evening. They were understandably distraught. Their daughter had always been responsible, always checked in, always let them know if something was wrong. "When was the last time you spoke to her?" I asked. "Sunday night," Marie said. "She called like she does every Sunday. We talked about her week, made plans for her to visit us next month. Everything was normal." "Did she mention any problems? Anyone bothering her? Anything worrying her?" "No, nothing. Rebecca's life is very routine. She goes to work, she comes home, she reads. She goes to church on Sundays. She doesn't go out much, doesn't have a lot of friends. We've been worried about that, actually, that she's too isolated. But she seemed happy." Thomas leaned forward. "You need to understand, Detective. Rebecca is not the type to just disappear. She's careful, organized, predictable. If she was going somewhere, she would have told us. She would have told her work." I believed him. Everything I'd learned about Rebecca Garrison suggested someone who followed routines, who valued stability, the kind of person who wouldn't just vanish without a word. But she had. Over the next 2 days, I interviewed everyone who knew Rebecca. Her co-workers at the library all said the same thing. She was quiet, professional, always on time. She did her job well and went home. She didn't socialize much outside of work. "Did she seem troubled lately?" I asked Margaret Chen. "No, not troubled, but—" Margaret hesitated. "But what?" "About a week ago, maybe 10 days, Rebecca asked me a strange question. She asked if I ever felt like I was forgetting something important, like there was something she was supposed to remember but couldn't." "What did you tell her?" "I said everyone feels that way sometimes. I asked if she was feeling okay, if she was sleeping well. She said she was fine, just a little distracted. I didn't think much of it at the time." I made a note of that and kept asking questions. Rebecca's neighbors in the apartment building barely knew her. She kept to herself, rarely made noise, always paid her rent on time. A few people mentioned seeing her coming and going, but nobody had noticed anything unusual in the days before she disappeared. The church she attended, a small Methodist congregation, had about 50 regular members. The pastor, Reverend William Hayes, remembered Rebecca well. "She's been coming here for about 2 years," he said. "Sweet girl, very devout. She volunteers at our food bank once a month. She's always been punctual, reliable. Did she come to church last Sunday?" He checked a sign-in sheet. "Yes, she was here. Arrived at 9:45 a.m. for the 10 o'clock service. She stayed for coffee hour afterward, left around noon. Did she talk to anyone? Did she seem upset or worried?" I spoke to her briefly. She seemed fine, maybe a little quieter than usual, but nothing that concerned me. By June 20th, 5 days after Rebecca was last seen, we still had no leads. Her car hadn't been found. Her credit cards hadn't been used since Monday, June 14th, when she bought groceries at the local supermarket. Her cell phone had been turned off, or the battery had died. It went straight to voicemail. I requested her cell phone records. The last call she made was on Monday, June 14th, at 6:42 p.m. She had called the library and left a voicemail for Margaret Chen, saying she would be in at her regular time on Tuesday, but Tuesday came, and Rebecca didn't show up. That's when things started to get strange. On June 21st, we found Rebecca's car. It was parked in a rest area off Highway 12, about 30 miles east of town. A state trooper noticed it during a routine patrol and ran the plates. When it came back as a Bolo vehicle, he called it in. I drove out there immediately. The car was locked. Through the windows, I could see Rebecca's purse on the passenger seat, her library ID badge clipped to the sun visor. No signs of struggle, no visible damage to the vehicle. We got a warrant and opened the car. Inside, we found Rebecca's purse containing her wallet, driver's license, credit cards, and $73 in cash. Her cell phone, battery dead. A library book checked out in Rebecca's name, about local history. A half-empty bottle of water. A map of Idaho with the route highlighted in yellow marker. The route started in Clearwater County and headed east on Highway 12, deeper into the wilderness. It ended at a small town called Lowell, population 32, in the middle of nowhere. Why would she be going to Lowell? My partner, Detective James Mason, asked. I have no idea, I said. Let's find out. We drove to Lowell that afternoon. It was a tiny place, barely more than a few buildings clustered around a gas station. The nearest proper town was 40 miles away. We showed Rebecca's photo to everyone we could find. The woman at the gas station, an elderly lady named Dorothy Price, recognized her immediately. Oh yes, she was here, Tuesday morning, June 15th. I felt my heart rate pick up. You're sure it was Tuesday, June 15th? Positive, it was trash day. I remember because I was taking out the trash when she pulled up. What time? Early. Maybe 7:30. 8 o'clock. I did the math in my head. Clearwater County to Lowell was about 90 miles. If Rebecca left her apartment Monday night, she could have arrived in Lowell by Tuesday morning. What did she do here? I asked. Bought gas. Paid with cash. Asked me for directions. Directions to where? Dorothy pointed east toward the mountains. She wanted to know how to get to Dworshak Reservoir. I told her to stay on Highway 12 for another 20 miles, then take the turnoff at North Fork. She thanked me and left. Did she say why she was going there? No, and I didn't ask. We get tourists sometimes, people going camping or fishing. I figured she was one of them. Did she seem okay? Worried, scared, anything unusual? Dorothy thought about it. She seemed determined, like she was on a mission or something. Not upset, just very focused. We thanked Dorothy and drove to Dworshak Reservoir. It's a massive body of water surrounded by dense forest. There are campgrounds, boat launches, and miles of isolated shoreline. If Rebecca had gone there, finding her would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. We checked the campgrounds. No one matching Rebecca's description had registered. We talked to park rangers, showed them her photo. A few thought she looked familiar, but no one could say for certain they'd seen her. We were about to head back when one of the rangers, a young guy named Tim Porter, stopped us. Wait, he said. I think I did see her. Tuesday afternoon, she was at the North Fork boat launch. What was she doing? Just standing there, looking out at the water. I drove past on my patrol and noticed her because she was by herself. No boat, no fishing gear, just standing there. What time was this? Around 3 o'clock. Did you talk to her? No. I was going to stop and ask if she needed help, but I got a call about a medical emergency at one of the campgrounds. By the time I came back that way, maybe an hour later, she was gone. So Rebecca had driven from Clearwater County to Lowell, then to Dworshak Reservoir. She'd been seen at the North Fork boat launch at 3 p.m. on Tuesday, June 15th, and then she vanished. We searched the area around the boat launch. We brought in search and rescue teams, cadaver dogs, volunteers. We combed through the forest, checked the shoreline, dragged parts of the reservoir. Nothing. Rebecca Garrison had simply disappeared. But here's where it got weird. On June 25th, 10 days after Rebecca was last seen, I received a call from a man named David Whitmore. He owned a small motel in a town called Riggins, about 60 miles northwest of Lowell. I think the woman you're looking for stayed at my motel, he said. I felt a jolt of hope. When? Wednesday, June 16th. She checked in around 9 p.m., checked out Thursday morning. I was confused. Wednesday, June 16th, was the day after Rebecca was seen at Dworshak Reservoir. but Riggins was in the opposite direction from the reservoir, back toward civilization. "Are you sure it was her?" I asked. "I'm looking at the registration right now. Rebecca Garrison. She paid in cash, didn't use a credit card, which is why it didn't show up in your search." James and I drove to Riggins immediately. David Whitmore was waiting for us with the registration card. Name: Rebecca Garrison. Check-in: 6/16/04, 9:07 p.m. Checkout: 6/17/04, 7:15 a.m. Room: payment, cash, $45. "Did you see her when she checked in?" I asked. "Yeah, I was working the desk. She seemed normal, tired maybe, but normal." "Did she say anything? Where she was going, why she was here?" "No, she just asked for a room, paid cash, took the key. She didn't even bring in luggage that I could see." "What about when she checked out?" "I wasn't here. I don't work mornings. My wife handles that. But the key was in the drop box, so she must have left early." We talked to David's wife, Linda. She said she saw a silver Honda Civic in the parking lot when she came to work at 6 a.m., but it was gone by 8 a.m. She never saw who was driving it. "Did you see anyone in the parking lot? Anyone around room 12? "No, I was in the office. I didn't pay attention to the rooms." We checked room 12. It had been cleaned and rented to other guests since Rebecca's stay. Any evidence that might have been there was long gone. But we had confirmation that Rebecca had been alive on Wednesday, June 16th, more than 24 hours after she was seen at Dworshak Reservoir. So where had she been in between? And where did she go after leaving the motel? I was starting to feel like I was chasing a ghost. We reviewed the timeline. Monday, June 14th, 6:42 p.m. Rebecca calls the library, says she'll be in on Tuesday. Tuesday, June 15th, 7:30, 8 a.m. Rebecca buys gas in Lowell. Tuesday, June 15th, 3 p.m. Rebecca seen at Dworshak Reservoir Wednesday, June 16th, 9:07 p.m. Rebecca checks into motel in Riggins Thursday, June 17th, 7:15 a.m. Rebecca checks out of motel. After that, nothing. But the timeline didn't make sense. How did Rebecca get from the reservoir to Riggins? And why? I looked at a map. Dworshak Reservoir to Riggins was about 60 miles, but it wasn't a straight shot. You had to backtrack, take Highway 12 west, then head north. It would take at least 90 minutes of driving. So, if Rebecca was at the reservoir at 3 p.m. on Tuesday, and she didn't check into the motel until 9 p.m. on Wednesday, where was she for 30 hours? We started making calls to every business, gas station, and restaurant between the reservoir and Riggins. We showed Rebecca's photo to dozens of people. And that's when we started hearing the same thing, over and over again. "Yeah, I saw her. Wednesday afternoon. She stopped in for coffee. I remember her, Wednesday evening. She asked for directions. Sure, she was here. Wednesday, late afternoon. She bought a sandwich." Multiple people in multiple towns all saying they saw Rebecca on Wednesday, not Tuesday, when she should have been driving from the reservoir to Riggins. Wednesday, after she should have already been at Riggins. I started documenting every sighting. Wednesday, June 16th, 2:15 p.m. Rebecca seen at a gas station in Grangeville, 30 miles east of Riggins. Wednesday, June 16th, 4:30 p.m. Rebecca seen at a diner in Cottonwood, 20 miles south of Grangeville. Wednesday, June 16th, 6:45 p.m. Rebecca seen at a grocery store in Whitebird, 15 miles west of Grangeville. Wednesday, June 16th, 9:07 p.m. Rebecca checks into motel in Riggins. She was moving in a pattern, not a straight line, but a strange wandering route through small towns, always heading generally toward Riggins but taking a roundabout way. But here's the thing that made my skin crawl. When we talked to the witnesses, they all described her the same way. She seemed lost. She looked confused. She asked me where she was. She wanted to know what day it was. Every single person said Rebecca seemed disoriented, like she didn't know where she was or how she got there. One woman, a cashier at the grocery store in Whitebird, gave us a particularly disturbing account. "I remember her because she seemed so out of it," the cashier said. Her name was Janet Morris. "She came in and walked around the store for a while, not really looking at anything. Then she came to the register and asked me what town this was." "What did you tell her?" "I said Whitebird." She looked confused, like that didn't mean anything to her. Then she asked me what day it was. I told her it was Wednesday. She just stared at me for a second, then left, didn't buy anything." "Did she say anything else?" Janet thought about it. "Yeah." As she was leaving, she turned back and said, "I'm not supposed to be here yet." I asked her what she meant, but she just walked out. "I'm not supposed to be here yet." What did that mean? I spent the next week trying to make sense of the timeline. Every time I thought I had it figured out, a new piece of information would come in that contradicted what I already knew. On June 28th, a hunter named Carl Briggs called the tip line. He said he'd been in the forest near Dworshak Reservoir on Tuesday, June 15th, the same day Rebecca was supposedly seen at the boat launch. "I was hiking back to my truck around 4:30 p.m., Carl said. "I saw a woman walking on one of the trails. She had dark hair, seemed like she was in a hurry. I thought it was strange because she wasn't dressed for hiking. She was wearing regular clothes, like work clothes. Can you describe her?" "Medium height, slim, dark hair pulled back. I didn't see her face clearly, but she matched the description from the news." "Which trail was she on?" "The North Fork Trail. It runs parallel to the reservoir, about a half-mile from the boat launch." James and I went back to the reservoir. The North Fork Trail was rugged, winding through dense forest. It wasn't the kind of trail you'd walk in work clothes. We hiked it for 3 miles looking for any sign that Rebecca had been there. We found nothing, but Carl's sighting added another data point to the timeline. Tuesday, June 15th, 3:00 p.m. Rebecca seen at boat launch. Tuesday, June 15th, 4:30 p.m. Rebecca seen hiking on North Fork Trail. Maybe. If both sightings were accurate, that would put Rebecca at the reservoir area for at least an hour and a half. Doing what? Walking in the forest? Looking for something? I went back to Dorothy Price in Lowell, the woman at the gas station who first saw Rebecca on Tuesday morning. "You said Rebecca asked for directions to Dworshak Reservoir," I said. "Did she mention why she was going there?" "No, but I asked if she was going camping. She said no, she was meeting someone." I felt my pulse quicken. "Meeting someone? She said that?" "Yes. I asked if she needed directions to a specific campground, and she said she wasn't camping, just meeting someone at the reservoir." "Did she say who?" "No." This was new information. Rebecca had driven 90 miles into the wilderness to meet someone at Dworshak Reservoir. But who? And why hadn't they come forward? I reviewed Rebecca's phone records again, going back weeks. There were no calls to anyone in the Lowell area, no calls to anyone whose phone number had a Clearwater or Idaho County prefix except her workplace and a few local businesses. The only personal calls were to her parents in Boise and a friend named Kelly Brennan who lived in Seattle. I'd already interviewed Kelly by phone. She said she and Rebecca had been friends since college, but only talked a few times a year. Their last conversation had been in March. Did Rebecca ever mention planning a trip, going camping, or visiting someone in the Lowell area? No, never. Rebecca didn't really do spontaneous trips. She liked to plan everything in advance. But Rebecca had made this trip. She'd driven 90 miles, told a stranger she was meeting someone, and then disappeared. On July 2nd, we got another report. A couple, who had been vacationing at Dworshak Reservoir in mid-June, had just returned home to Montana and seen the news about Rebecca. They called to say they might have seen her. We were at the North Fork boat launch on Tuesday afternoon, June 15th, the husband, Robert Tucker, said. There was a woman there by herself. We noticed her because she seemed upset. What time was this? Around 2:30, 3 o'clock. We just launched our boat. Did you talk to her? My wife did, Robert said. He put his wife on the phone. I asked if she was okay, Sarah Tucker said. She was crying, not sobbing, but tears were running down her face. She was just standing there looking at the water. What did she say? She said she was fine, just emotional. I asked if she needed help, if she wanted me to call someone. She said no, she was just saying goodbye. Saying goodbye to what? I don't know. I assumed she meant the place, like she had memories there or something. I didn't want to pry. We went out on the boat, and when we came back a few hours later, she was gone. Saying goodbye? To what? To whom? I added this to the growing list of strange things Rebecca had said or done in the days before she disappeared. Asked her supervisor if she ever felt like she was forgetting something. Told Dorothy Price she was meeting someone at the reservoir. Told Sarah Tucker she was saying goodbye. Told Janet Morris, I'm not supposed to be here yet. Each statement felt significant, but I couldn't figure out how they fit together. On July 8th, we finally got a break, or what seemed like a break at first. A park ranger at Dworshak Reservoir found something while patrolling one of the remote trails. It was a notebook, water-damaged but still mostly readable. Inside the cover was written, Property of Rebecca Garrison. The ranger called it in immediately. We drove out to collect it. The notebook was one of those small, spiral-bound pads you can fit in a pocket. The first few pages were grocery lists and work reminders, mundane stuff. But toward the middle, the entries changed. They became stranger. The first odd entry was dated June 7th, 8 days before Rebecca disappeared. Had the dream again. Same as before. I'm at the water. Someone is calling my name, but I can't see them. I know I have to go there. Why do I keep dreaming this? June 9th. The dream is getting more vivid. I can almost see who's calling me. It feels important, like I'm forgetting something I'm supposed to remember. June 11th. I looked up Dworshak Reservoir today. I've never been there. So why does it feel so familiar? Why do I feel like I need to go there? June 13th. I can't shake this feeling. I know this sounds crazy, but I feel like someone is waiting for me at the reservoir. I have to go. I have to find out what this means. June 14th. I'm going tomorrow. I can't explain why, but I have to. Maybe I'll finally understand. That was the last entry. Rebecca had been dreaming about Dworshak Reservoir for at least a week before she disappeared. She'd felt compelled to go there like someone was calling to her. But who and why? I showed the notebook to Rebecca's parents. Marie Garrison read through it with tears streaming down her face. She never mentioned any of this to us, she said. Dreams about water, feeling like she had to go somewhere. She never said a word. Did Rebecca have any connection to Dworshak Reservoir? Did your family ever vacation there? Never, Thomas said firmly. We've never been there. I don't think Rebecca had ever been to that part of Idaho at all. I consulted with a psychologist who specialized in missing persons cases. I showed her Rebecca's notebook entries. This sounds like a compulsion, Dr. Ellen Crawford said. Something driving her to a specific place. It could be psychological, maybe triggered by stress or anxiety. But without talking to Rebecca, it's impossible to know what was really going on in her mind. Could it be related to her disappearance? Almost certainly. If she was experiencing intrusive thoughts or compulsions strong enough to drive 90 miles to a remote location, that's significant. But again, I can't diagnose without meeting her. The notebook gave us insight into Rebecca's state of mind, but it didn't tell us where she was now. On July 15th, exactly 1 month after Rebecca was last seen, we got a call that changed everything. A woman named Patricia Holmes contacted us. She lived in a small town called Elk City, about 40 miles southeast of Lowell. She said she'd seen something that might be related to our case. "I was at the Elk City Cemetery last week, visiting my mother's grave," Patricia said. "I saw a woman there I'd never seen before. She was standing in front of one of the old graves, just staring at it. I didn't think much of it at the time, but then I saw the news about the missing woman from Clearwater. I think it might have been her." "When was this?" I asked. "July 9th, Thursday afternoon." I felt my heart skip a beat. July 9th was almost a month after Rebecca was last confirmed seen. If this sighting was real, it meant Rebecca had been alive and in the area for weeks. What was she doing? Just standing there. I watched her for a few minutes because it seemed strange. She wasn't putting flowers down or anything, just standing there looking at the gravestone. "Did you talk to her?" "No, I went to my mother's grave, which is on the other side of the cemetery. When I left, maybe 20 minutes later, she was gone." "Can you show me which grave she was looking at?" James and I drove to Elk City that afternoon. The cemetery was small, maybe 100 graves, mostly old. Patricia met us there and walked us to the grave Rebecca had been standing at. It was an old headstone, weathered and hard to read. The name carved into it was Mary Catherine Garrison, 1892 to 1934. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Garrison," James said. "Same last name as Rebecca." We took photos of the headstone and ran the name. Mary Catherine Garrison had died in 1934 at age 42. According to death records, she had drowned in the North Fork of the Clearwater River. I called Rebecca's father immediately. "Thomas, did you have any family in Idaho in the early 1900s?" "I don't think so. My family's from Montana originally. We didn't move to Idaho until the 1960s. "What about anyone named Mary Catherine Garrison?" There was a long pause. "That's my grandmother's name. But she didn't die in 1934. She died in 1987. I was at her funeral." "Your grandmother's name was Mary Catherine Garrison?" "Yes, but she lived in Bozeman, Montana her whole life. She never lived in Idaho." I looked at the gravestone again. "Thomas, this might sound like a strange question, but do you have a copy of your family tree? I need to know if there were any other Mary Catherine Garrisons in your family." He said he'd check and get back to me. 2 hours later, he called back. His voice was shaking. "There was another Mary Catherine," he said. "My great-great-grandmother. She was born in 1892. According to the family records, she died in 1934 in Idaho. I'd forgotten about her because no one in my family ever talked about her." "Do you know how she died?" "The family records say she drowned. There was some kind of accident at a river." The North Fork of the Clearwater River flows into Dworshak Reservoir. I sat at my desk, staring at my notes, trying to make sense of this. Rebecca had been dreaming about water, about someone calling her name. She had felt compelled to go to Dworshak Reservoir. She had been seen at the North Fork boat launch, crying, saying she was saying goodbye. And she had visited the grave of her great-great-grandmother, who had drowned in the same area in 1934. None of this made any rational sense, but it was all connected somehow. On July 22nd, we got another sighting. This time from a man named George Kendrick, who ran a small general store in Elk City. "She was in my store yesterday," George said. "I recognized her from the missing person flyers." "What did she do?" "Bought water and a granola bar, paid cash. I asked if she was okay because she looked rough, like she'd been living outside. She said she was fine, just hiking. Did she say where she was going? No, but she asked me about the old mining roads in the area. I told her most of them are closed now, too dangerous. She thanked me and left. We rushed to Elk City, but by the time we got there, Rebecca was gone. The sightings kept coming, but they didn't help us find her. It was like Rebecca was moving through the wilderness, appearing in random places, then vanishing again. July 28th, seen at a gas station in Dixie August 3rd, seen on a trail near Oro Grande August 10th, seen at a campground near Red River Ranger Station. Each time, witnesses described her the same way: disoriented, lost, asking strange questions. She never stayed in one place long enough for us to catch up. The search teams combed the forests and mountains. We had helicopters, dogs, volunteers. We checked every trail, every campground, every abandoned building. But Rebecca was always one step ahead or one step behind. We could never quite reach her. On August 15th, 2 months after Rebecca first disappeared, I sat in my office and looked at the map I'd been updating with every sighting. The pattern was clear now. Rebecca was moving in a wide circle around Dworshak Reservoir. She'd start at one point, wander through the wilderness for days, then appear in a town, buy supplies, and disappear again. But why? What was she doing out there? And how was she surviving? By August, she'd been in the wilderness for 2 months with no apparent supplies, no camping gear, no preparation. It didn't make sense. Nothing about this case made sense. On August 20th, I received a package in the mail. No return address, postmarked from Grangeville. Inside was a photograph. It showed Rebecca standing at the edge of Dworshak Reservoir. The photo was taken from a distance, maybe 50 yards away. Rebecca was looking out at the water, her back to the camera. She was wearing the same clothes she'd been wearing when she disappeared: jeans and a blue blouse. There was nothing else in the package, no note, no explanation. I sent the photo to the lab for analysis. They confirmed it was Rebecca and estimated the photo had been taken sometime in July or August based on the vegetation in the background. Someone had been close enough to photograph Rebecca but hadn't called the police. Why? I showed the photo to Rebecca's parents. Marie broke down crying. Thomas just stared at it in silence. "She's alive," he finally said. "At least she was when this was taken." But that raised more questions than it answered. Who took the photo? Why did they send it to me anonymously? I put the photo on the bulletin board in my office, next to the map and the timeline. I stared at it for hours, trying to see something that would help me understand. On August 25th, we got our most detailed sighting yet. A couple named Mark and Jennifer Davis had been camping at Dworshak Reservoir. They called to report that they'd spoken with Rebecca at length. "She came to our campsite on August 23rd, around dinner time," Mark said. "She asked if she could have some food. We gave her a sandwich and water. She seemed grateful, but distant, like she was only half present." "Did you know who she was?" "Not at first. Jennifer recognized her from the missing person posters later that evening. We tried to convince her to come with us, to get help, but she refused. I interviewed them in person." Jennifer was visibly shaken by the encounter. "She told us the strangest things," Jennifer said. "She kept talking about time like it wasn't real, like she could move through it. She said she'd been here before, decades ago, even though that's impossible." "What exactly did she say?" Jennifer pulled out a small notebook. "I wrote it down because it was so weird. She said, 'I keep coming back to this moment. I've been here dozens of times, but it's always the same day, the same hour. I can't move forward, only sideways.'" "What did she mean by that?" "I have no idea. I asked her to explain, but she just shook her head. Then she said something even stranger. She said, 'In 1934, I drowned here. But I'm still alive.'" "How is that possible?" I felt a chill run through me. She said she drowned in 1934? Yes. She talked about drowning in the river, about being pulled under. She said she remembered it clearly, but then she said, "But I'm here now, so maybe I didn't drown. Maybe I'm still drowning." Did she say anything else? Mark spoke up. She asked us what year it was. When we said 2004, she laughed, not a happy laugh, more like a laugh of disbelief. She said, "Of course it is. It's always 2004 here." Did she explain what she meant? No. We tried to get her to come with us to the ranger station to get help, but she said she couldn't leave yet. She said she had to wait for something. Wait for what? She wouldn't say. She just thanked us for the food and walked back into the woods. I asked them to show me where this happened. We drove to their campsite, and they pointed to the tree line where Rebecca had disappeared. "Did you try to follow her?" I asked. "We did," Mark said. "But it was getting dark and we lost sight of her within a few minutes. The forest is too thick." I organized another search of the area. We spent 3 days combing through the forest around the Davises' campsite. We found nothing. No sign of Rebecca, no evidence she'd been there. But we did find something else. Something that made the case even more confusing. One of the search team members, a volunteer named Lisa Grant, discovered an old campsite about a mile from where Rebecca was last seen. It looked like it hadn't been used in years. There was a fire ring, some rotted logs arranged as seating, and debris scattered around. Among the debris, Lisa found a piece of fabric. It was blue, like the blouse Rebecca had been wearing. We collected it and sent it to the lab. The results came back a week later. The fabric matched Rebecca's blouse, but according to the lab it was old, weathered. The analysis suggested it had been exposed to the elements for years, not weeks or months. "This doesn't make sense," James said when I showed him the report. "Rebecca disappeared in June. It's only been 3 months. How could her clothing be weathered like it's been out here for years?" "I don't know," I said. "But there's something else." I showed him another piece of evidence that had been found at the old campsite. A can, rusted, barely readable, but the lab had managed to identify it as a brand of coffee that hadn't been manufactured since the 1970s. "So, someone camped there decades ago," James said. "That's not unusual. But Rebecca's clothing was there too. How?" We didn't have an answer. On September 1st, I decided to review every single piece of evidence we had, looking for something I'd missed. I spread everything out on the conference room table. Photos, witness statements, timelines, Rebecca's notebook, the piece of fabric, lab reports, and that's when I saw it. The thing that had been bothering me all along, but I couldn't quite articulate. The witnesses who had seen Rebecca described her wearing the same clothes every time. Blue blouse, jeans. The same outfit she'd been wearing when she left her apartment in June. But she'd been seen dozens of times over 3 months. Had she been wearing the same clothes for 3 months straight? No laundry, no changes, nothing? I pulled up the photos from various sightings. In each one where you could see Rebecca clearly, she was wearing the same thing. Same blue blouse, same jeans, same appearance. But here's what made my blood run cold. In every photo, in every sighting, Rebecca looked exactly the same. Not just her clothes, but her hair, her appearance, everything. No tan despite being in the wilderness all summer. No visible dirt or wear on her clothes. No weight loss despite allegedly living off the land for months. She looked exactly the same in August as she had in June. I called Dr. Crawford, the psychologist. "Is it possible for someone to survive in the wilderness for 3 months without showing any physical signs of it?" I asked. "Highly unlikely," she said. "Even with survival skills, you'd see weight loss, sun exposure, wear and tear on clothing. The human body can't maintain itself perfectly without proper nutrition and shelter. What if someone was helping her, bringing her supplies? Then why all the sightings of her appearing lost and confused? And why wouldn't she just leave with whoever is helping her? Good questions. No good answers. On September 10th, 4 days before the official search was scheduled to be called off due to lack of leads, I got a call from a hiker named Rachel Morrison. "I saw her," Rachel said, "today at Dworshak Reservoir." I grabbed my keys. "Where exactly?" "The North Fork boat launch. Same place she was seen before. She was just standing there looking at the water." I drove faster than I probably should have. James met me at the reservoir. We rushed to the boat launch. No one was there. Rachel was waiting for us. "She was here 15 minutes ago, I swear." "Did you talk to her?" "I tried. I called out to her. She turned and looked at me, but it was like she didn't see me, like she was looking through me. Then she just walked away into the forest." "Which direction?" Rachel pointed. "That way, toward the North Fork Trail." We ran. The trail was rough, winding through dense trees. We searched for an hour, calling Rebecca's name. Nothing. As the sun started to set, we had to give up. James was frustrated. I was exhausted. "It's like she's a ghost," James said as we walked back to our cars. "She's here, but she's not. We can never quite reach her." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Rebecca had told Mark and Jennifer Davis. About time not being real, about coming back to the same moment, about drowning in 1934 but still being alive. It was nonsense, it had to be nonsense. But what if it wasn't? What if Rebecca really believed she had drowned in 1934? What if that's why she kept coming back to the reservoir, to the place where her great-great-grandmother had died? I pulled up the death certificate for Mary Catherine Garrison. She had drowned on June 15th, 1934. June 15th. The same date Rebecca disappeared in 2004. 70 years to the day. I stared at the dates, my mind racing. Was it a coincidence? It had to be a coincidence. But nothing about this case felt like a coincidence. I started researching Mary Catherine Garrison. There wasn't much information available. She had lived in a small logging community near the North Fork. She had been married, had 2 children. On June 15, 1934, she had gone to the river to wash clothes and never came home. Her body was found 3 days later, caught in the rocks downstream. Accidental drowning, the death certificate said, but there was a newspaper article from a local paper, archived at the county library. I drove there first thing in the morning and requested it. The article was brief, written in the style of 1930s journalism. But one paragraph caught my attention. Witnesses reported that Mrs. Garrison had been behaving strangely in the days before her death. She told neighbors she had been having vivid dreams of drowning and felt compelled to go to the river. On the morning of June 15th, she was seen walking toward the water in what witnesses described as a trance-like state. I read the paragraph 3 times. Vivid dreams. Felt compelled. Trance-like state. The same words people had used to describe Rebecca. On September 14, 2004, the official search for Rebecca Garrison was suspended. After 3 months of intensive searching, dozens of sightings, and thousands of man-hours, we had nothing. Rebecca's parents held a memorial service. They didn't want to. Thomas especially insisted that Rebecca was still alive somewhere. But Marie said they needed closure, needed a way to say goodbye even if they couldn't bury her. I attended the service. So did about 50 other people from Rebecca's life. Co-workers, neighbors, church members, everyone who knew the quiet librarian who had vanished into the wilderness. Reverend Hayes gave the eulogy. He talked about Rebecca's kindness, her dedication, her quiet faith. He said he believed she was at peace now, wherever she was. I wasn't so sure. The case officially went cold on October 1st, 2004. I kept it on my desk for another month, going through the evidence, looking for something we missed, but eventually I had to let it go. Other cases needed my attention. Missing persons who might still be found, families who needed answers I could actually give them. I put the Rebecca Garrison file in a box and sent it to storage. But I never forgot it. Years passed. I checked the file periodically, hoping for new information. Every few months someone would call with a sighting. Rebecca at a gas station, Rebecca on a trail, Rebecca standing by the water. We'd investigate. We'd search. We'd find nothing. The sightings became less frequent. By 2006, they had stopped completely. Rebecca Garrison had vanished as mysteriously as she had lived those last few months. In 2008, 4 years after Rebecca disappeared, I got a call from a ranger at Dworshak Reservoir. "I found something you might want to see," he said. I drove out there. The ranger, a different one than I'd worked with in 2004, led me to the North Fork boat launch. "We were doing shoreline cleanup," he said. "Found this wedged between some rocks." It was a bottle, a glass bottle with a cork stopper. Inside was a piece of paper. We carefully removed the cork and extracted the paper. It was wet, but readable. The message was written in blue ink. I understand now. Time isn't a line, it's a circle. I keep coming back to this moment, this place. Every June 15th, I'm here. I've been here for 70 years. I'll be here for 70 more, unless I can break the pattern. But I don't know how. Tell my parents I'm sorry. Tell them I didn't mean to leave. I just couldn't stay. R.G. The handwriting matched Rebecca's. I sent the note to the lab for dating. The paper was recent, manufactured sometime in the early 2000s. The ink was standard blue ballpoint pen, but the note had been in that bottle for years. The ranger confirmed that section of shoreline had been cleaned just 2 years prior, and the bottle definitely wasn't there then. So, Rebecca had put it in the water sometime between 2006 and 2008, which meant she had still been alive 2 years after the search ended, or had been alive. Past tense. I showed the note to Rebecca's parents. Thomas had aged visibly in the 4 years since Rebecca disappeared. Marie looked like she hadn't slept well in just as long. "What does it mean?" Marie asked. "Time is a circle? Every June 15th? "I don't know," I said honestly, but I had a theory. I didn't want to share it with them because it sounded insane, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. Rebecca believed she was caught in some kind of loop, that every June 15th she was pulled back to Dworshak Reservoir, to the place where her great-great-grandmother had drowned 70 years earlier. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be possible. But how else did you explain the timeline? The sightings that made no sense? The clothing that never changed? The way Rebecca seemed to exist outside normal time? In 2010, 6 years after Rebecca disappeared, I retired from the police force. The Rebecca Garrison case was one of many I'd worked over my career, but it was the one that haunted me. Before I left, I went through the file one more time. I made copies of everything and took them home with me. I've spent the last years reviewing it periodically, trying to find an explanation that makes rational sense. I've never found one. Here's what we know for certain. Rebecca Garrison disappeared on June 15, 2004. Her car was found at a rest area 30 miles from her home. She was seen multiple times over 3 months in the wilderness around Dworshak Reservoir. She left a message in a bottle saying she was caught in a time loop. She hasn't been seen since 2008. Here's what we don't know. Where is Rebecca now? What actually happened to her? Why did she go to the reservoir in the first place? How is any of this possible? The rational explanation is that Rebecca had some kind of mental breakdown, that the stress of her quiet, isolated life finally got to her, that she experienced a psychotic break, developed delusions about time travel and reincarnation, and eventually died somewhere in the wilderness where her body hasn't been found. That's what the official file says, that's what most people believe, but I can't accept it. Not completely. Because there are too many things that don't fit that explanation. The timeline that makes no sense. The witnesses who saw her in multiple places at impossible times. The photograph sent anonymously. The note in the bottle. The connection to Mary Catherine Garrison, who drowned 70 years earlier to the day. Every June 15th, I think about Rebecca. I wonder if she's still out there, caught in whatever loop she believed she was in. Still standing at the edge of Dworshak Reservoir, looking out at the water, waiting for something. Last June 15th, 2014, 10 years after Rebecca disappeared, I drove to Dworshak Reservoir. I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping to see her, to finally get answers. I stood at the North Fork boat launch for hours, watching the water, listening to the wind in the trees. I didn't see Rebecca, but I felt something, a presence, like someone was there, just out of sight, watching me the way I was watching for them. I called out her name. Rebecca, if you're here, if you can hear me, your parents want you to know they love you. They never stopped looking. The wind picked up. The water rippled. And for just a moment, I could have sworn I saw a figure standing on the opposite shore. Dark hair, blue blouse, looking across the water at me. I blinked, and the figure was gone. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe it was grief for a case I never solved, a woman I never found. Or maybe it was Rebecca, still trapped in her loop, still waiting for something she can't name. I don't know. I'll probably never know. But every June 15th I go back. I stand at that boat launch and I wait, just in case she comes back, just in case she's ready to be found. The file is still open, not officially, but in my mind. In the box I keep in my home office with all the other unsolved cases. Rebecca Garrison. Missing since June 15th, 2004. Last seen, unknown. Location, unknown. Status, unknown. Everything about this case is unknown, and maybe that's how it will stay. But I keep the file anyway. I keep searching, even though I'm retired, even though there's no official investigation anymore, because somewhere out there, Rebecca Garrison exists, or existed, or is existing in some way I can't comprehend, and she deserves to be found, even if the timeline makes no sense, even if the evidence contradicts itself, even if the only explanation is impossible. She deserves to be found. I just don't know if she can be. My name is James Whitman, and I've been working homicide and major crimes for 16 years. In that time, I've learned to trust my instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is wrong, even if I can't immediately explain why. This case felt wrong from the very beginning. It started with something small, something that shouldn't have mattered at all. A routine break-in at a house on Elm Street. The homeowner, a man named Richard Holloway, called it in on September 3rd, 2009. He'd been out of town for the weekend and came home to find his back door forced open. Normally, a break-in wouldn't come to me. That's patrol work, maybe a detective if it's part of a series. But this one landed on my desk because of what the responding officer wrote in his report. Officer Marcus Kane, badge 4729, had been the first to respond. His report was standard until the last paragraph. That's where it got strange. Homeowner reports nothing stolen. However, items in the living room have been rearranged. Furniture moved approximately 2 to 3 feet from original positions. No apparent motive. Homeowner extremely disturbed by this. Requests follow-up investigation. I read that paragraph 3 times. Items rearranged but nothing stolen. That was unusual but not unprecedented. Sometimes burglars get interrupted. Sometimes they're looking for specific items and move furniture to check hiding spots. But something about Officer Kane's wording bothered me. Homeowner extremely disturbed. Not worried, not upset, disturbed. I called Richard Holloway and asked if I could come by to talk. He agreed immediately. Holloway was in his mid-50s, a high school teacher. Lived alone, divorced, no kids. He met me at his door, looking exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. "Thank you for coming," he said as he let me inside. "I know this probably seems like nothing, but I can't stop thinking about it." The living room looked normal to me. Couch against one wall, TV on the opposite side, coffee table in the middle. Everything clean and orderly. "Can you show me what was different?" I asked. Holloway pointed to the couch. This was 6 inches further from the wall. The coffee table was rotated 90 degrees. That chair, he gestured to an armchair in the corner, was facing the window instead of the TV. "Is it possible you're misremembering where things were?" "No." His voice was firm. "I've lived here for 8 years. I know exactly where my furniture goes. I'm particular about it." "And nothing was taken? Nothing disturbed elsewhere in the house?" "That's what makes it so strange. My bedroom is untouched. The office where I keep my laptop and important papers, nothing. The only room that was changed was this one." I looked around the living room again. Why would someone break in just to rearrange your furniture? I don't know, but there's something else. Holloway walked to the coffee table and picked up a photo album that had been sitting there. This was open when I got home. Open to a specific page. He showed me. It was a photo from what looked like the 1970s or early 80s, a family portrait. A couple with a young boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old. "Who are they?" I asked. "I have no idea. This isn't my photo album." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean it's not yours?" "I've never seen this album before. It's not mine. Someone brought it here and left it on my coffee table." I put on gloves and examined the album carefully. It was old, the kind with sticky pages and plastic covers. The photos inside were all from the same era, late 70s to early 80s. Different families, different locations, but all clearly from the same general time period. "You're absolutely certain this doesn't belong to you? Maybe it was your parents' bagasse or left here by a previous owner." "Detective, I know what I own. This album was not in my house before I left for the weekend." I bagged the album as evidence and took photos of the room. As I was finishing up, Holloway said something that stuck with me. "Do you believe in messages, Detective? Like someone is trying to tell you something but you don't understand the language?" "What do you mean? This feels like a message." The furniture moved, the album left open to that specific photo. Someone is trying to communicate something. I just don't know what. I told him I'd look into it and left. Back at the station, I logged the photo album into evidence and started running checks. The break-in at Holloway's house was clean. No fingerprints except his own. The back door lock had been jimmied, simple and professional. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. I sent the photos from the album to our records department to see if they matched anyone in our database. The faces were too old, from decades ago, but it was worth a try. While I waited for results, I pulled up reports of similar break-ins in the area. Nothing matched. No other cases of someone breaking in just to rearrange furniture. 2 days later, on September 5th, I got another case. This time it was a missing person report. A woman named Helen Martinez, age 37, hadn't shown up for work at the grocery store where she worked as a manager. Her assistant manager filed the report after Helen failed to answer calls and didn't show up for 2 consecutive shifts. I went to Helen's apartment. The landlord let me in. The place was immaculate, everything in order. Helen's car was in the parking lot. Her purse was on the kitchen counter. Her phone was on the nightstand, turned off. Everything suggested Helen had left voluntarily, taking nothing with her. But why? I checked her bedroom. The bed was made. The closet was full of clothes. Nothing appeared to be missing, but there was something strange on her dresser. A photo in a frame. The glass was cracked, like someone had hit it hard enough to spider the surface but not break it completely. I looked closer at the photo. It showed Helen with a man and a young girl, maybe 4 years old. They were standing in front of a house, smiling. A family portrait. I asked the landlord if he knew who the man and girl were. Helen never mentioned family, he said. As far as I know, she lived alone. Never saw anyone visiting. I took the photo back to the station. Something about it was bothering me, but I couldn't figure out what. That evening, I was reviewing both cases when my partner, Detective Lisa Grant, came into my office. "You got a second?" she asked. "Sure, what's up?" "I caught a weird one today. Vandalism at Oak Hill Cemetery. Someone dug up a section of grass near one of the old graves. Didn't damage the grave itself, just dug a hole about 3 feet deep right next to the headstone. Kids messing around? Maybe, but the groundskeeper said it looked deliberate, like someone was searching for something. And here's the weird part." She handed me a photo. "They left this at the bottom of the hole." The photo showed the same image I'd just been looking at. Helen Martinez with a man and a young girl. I stared at it. "Where did you get this?" "I just told you. At the cemetery." "No, I mean, I have the same photo. From a missing person case I'm working." Lisa frowned. "That's not possible. This photo was in a hole in the ground. It's been there for a while. The paper is water damaged and dirty." I showed her the photo from Helen's apartment. They were identical. Same people, same pose, same background, except one was framed and cracked, and the other was water damaged and found buried in a cemetery. "What the hell is going on?" Lisa said. I didn't have an answer. Over the next week, 3 more incidents were reported. September 8th, a man named Thomas Garrett called to report that someone had broken into his storage unit and removed a single box. Only one box, leaving behind tools, furniture, and other valuable items. The box contained old family photos from the 1980s. September 10th, a woman named Sandra Mills reported finding her childhood dollhouse in her attic rearranged. The miniature furniture had been moved around, and a small photograph had been placed inside. The photo showed a family she didn't recognize. September 12th, a break-in at the county records office. Nothing stolen except one file from the archives. The file was a death certificate from 1983 for a child named Emily Brennan, age 4. I sat in my office staring at the evidence board I'd started. 5 incidents in 10 days. All seemingly unrelated. All with strange details that didn't quite make sense. Richard Holloway's rearranged furniture and mysterious photo album. Helen Martinez missing, with a photo of people we couldn't identify. A hole dug in a cemetery with an identical photo. Thomas Garrett's stolen box of photos. Sandra Mills' dollhouse rearranged with another mystery photo. A stolen death certificate for a child from 1983. I pulled up the death certificate we'd gotten a copy of before it was stolen. Emily Brennan, age 4, died on September 15, 1983. Cause of death: accidental drowning. Parents: Robert and Claire Brennan. Address: 4521 Maple Street. Maple Street. That was 3 blocks from Richard Holloway's house on Elm Street. I checked property records. In 1983, the house at 4521 Maple Street had been owned by Robert and Claire Brennan. They'd sold it in 1984, a year after their daughter died. I tried to find the Brennans now. Robert had died in '97. Claire had remarried and moved to Oregon. I called her. "Mrs. Brennan, my name is Detective James Whitman. I'm calling about your daughter, Emily." There was a long silence on the other end. "Why?" she finally asked. Her voice was tight, controlled. "We've had some unusual incidents in the area where you used to live. I'm trying to understand if there's a connection." "What kind of incidents?" I explained about the break-ins, the photos, the rearranged furniture. I didn't mention the stolen death certificate. That's impossible," Claire said. "Emily died 26 years ago. Why would anyone be doing these things now?" "I don't know, but I'm trying to find out. Can you tell me anything about the days before Emily's death? Anything unusual?" "It was an accident. Emily wandered away from the yard while I was inside. She fell into a neighbor's pond. By the time we found her, her voice broke. It was ruled accidental. There was nothing suspicious about it." "I understand. I'm sorry to bring this up, but did anything strange happen in the weeks after? Any unusual visitors? Anyone asking about Emily?" "No, just grief. We sold the house and tried to move on with our lives." I thanked her and hung up. Then I pulled up the police report from Emily Brennan's death in 1983. It was a short report. 4-year-old girl wanders into neighbor's yard, falls into decorative pond, drowns before being discovered. Tragic, but straightforward. The investigating officer was listed as Officer Patrick Doyle, badge 2156. He'd retired in '95. I called him at home. "Officer Doyle, I'm Detective Whitman. I'm reviewing an old case you worked, Emily Brennan, 1983. "I remember it," he said quietly. "You don't forget cases like that. Was there anything about it that bothered you? Anything that didn't fit?" He was quiet for a moment. "Why are you asking about this now?" "We've had some incidents that might be connected. I'm trying to understand if there's a pattern." "What kind of incidents?" I gave him a brief overview. He listened without interrupting. "That's strange," he finally said. "Because something did bother me about the Brennan case, but I could never put my finger on it. The death was clearly accidental. The evidence all pointed to it. But the family, they were off somehow." "Off how?" "The mother was devastated, as you'd expect. But the father, Robert Brennan, he was too calm. Not in a suspicious way, more like he was in shock, and he kept saying something strange." "What did he say?" "He kept saying she was supposed to be there, not she wasn't supposed to be there, which is what you'd expect. He said she was supposed to be there, at the pond, like it was meant to happen." I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Did you follow up on that?" I tried. I asked him what he meant. He said he didn't know, that he was confused, grieving. I didn't push it. Looking back, maybe I should have. I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat staring at my notes, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. A 4-year-old girl dies in an accident in 1983. 26 years later, someone is breaking into houses, rearranging furniture, leaving old photos, digging holes in cemeteries. All somehow connected to this long-dead child. But why? And who? On September 15, 2009, exactly 26 years after Emily Brennan's death, I got a call that changed everything. A body had been found at Oak Hill Cemetery. Not buried, but lying on the ground next to the same grave where the hole had been dug. The grave of Emily Brennan. I rushed to the scene. The cemetery was cordoned off. Crime scene techs were already processing the area. The victim was Helen Martinez, the missing woman from the grocery store. She was lying on her back, arms at her sides, eyes closed. At first glance, she looked like she might be sleeping, but she wasn't breathing. The medical examiner, Dr. Sarah Foster, was examining the body. "What can you tell me?" I asked. "No obvious signs of trauma. No wounds, no defensive marks. She's been dead for maybe 12 to 18 hours. Cause of death? I won't know for sure until the autopsy, but initial assessment suggests possible drowning." I stared at her. "Drowning? We're in a cemetery." "I know. But look at her lungs." Dr. Foster indicated the slight froth at Helen's mouth and nose. "That's consistent with drowning. There's also this." She showed me Helen's hands. The fingers were wrinkled, like they'd been submerged in water for an extended period. Where did she drown? I have no idea, but she wasn't killed here. The body was placed here post-mortem, probably within the last few hours. I looked around the cemetery. The hole that had been dug next to Emily's grave had been filled in. Fresh dirt, recently disturbed. "Did anyone check what was in the hole before it was filled?" I asked one of the techs. "We're excavating it now," he said. They dug carefully, documenting everything. 3 feet down, they found something. A waterproof container, the kind you'd use for camping. Inside was a photo album, the same album that had been left at Richard Holloway's house. "How is this possible?" Lisa said, looking over my shoulder. "We logged that album into evidence." I checked my phone. I called the evidence room. "Can you verify that the photo album from the Holloway break-in is still in storage?" They put me on hold. 2 minutes later, they came back. "Yes, it's here. Item 092841. Can you open it and confirm what's inside?" Another pause. "Detective, the album is here, but it's empty. All the photos are gone." I hung up and looked at the album in the waterproof container. I opened it. The photos were all there, exactly as they had been when we collected them from Holloway's house. "Someone took the photos from the evidence and put them back in the album," Lisa said, "and then buried it here next to Emily Brennan's grave. But who has access to the evidence room?" That was a good question. Access was restricted to authorized personnel. Officers, detectives, evidence technicians, someone with a badge and clearance, or someone who knew how to bypass the security. I bagged the album again and marked it as new evidence. Then I focused on Helen Martinez. Why was she here? Why was her body placed next to Emily Brennan's grave? I pulled Helen's missing person file. We'd interviewed her coworkers, her landlord, her few friends. Nobody knew why she'd disappeared. But there was one detail I'd overlooked. Helen's employment records showed she'd worked at 3 different grocery stores in the past 10 years, all in different towns. She moved every few years, never staying in one place for long. I called her previous employer in Great Falls. The manager there remembered Helen. She was a good worker, the manager said. Quiet, reliable, but she left suddenly, gave 2 weeks' notice and said she had to move. Did she say why? Family reasons, she said, but she seemed nervous, like she was running from something. I got the same story from her employer before that, in Billings. Helen Martinez had been moving from town to town, staying just long enough to blend in, then leaving again, running from something or looking for something. I checked her apartment again, this time more carefully. In her closet, hidden behind a stack of shoeboxes, I found a notebook. The entries were sporadic, dated over several years. July 2006. Saw her again today. Same girl, same age, How is this possible? March 2007. Moved to Great Falls. Maybe she won't find me here. October 2008. She's here too. I don't understand. She should be grown by now, or dead, or something. But she's still 4 years old. April 2009. I can't keep running. I need to find out what this means. August 2009. Going back to where it started. If I can find the grave, maybe I'll understand. The last entry was dated September 14th, 2009. Tomorrow is the anniversary. I'll be at the cemetery. Maybe that's where this ends. I read the notebook 3 times. Helen Martinez had been seeing someone. A girl who stayed 4 years old, who followed her from town to town. A girl who shouldn't exist. I showed the notebook to Lisa. She read it in silence. She was seeing a ghost, Lisa said. A little girl who never aged? Or she was experiencing some kind of psychological break. Hallucinations, paranoid delusions. Then why is she dead at Emily Brennan's grave? That was the question. I decided to check the other incidents more carefully. Richard Holloway, Thomas Garrett, Sandra Mills. All had experienced something strange in the past 2 weeks. I visited Holloway first. He looked even more exhausted than before. Have you experienced anything else unusual? I asked. I keep seeing her, he said quietly. Seeing who? A little girl, dark hair, maybe 4 years old. She stands outside my house at night, just looking at my window. When I go outside to check, she's gone. How long has this been happening? Since the break-in. Every night. I talked to Thomas Garrett next. He told me the same thing. A little girl standing in his yard, watching his house, always at night, always disappearing when he got close. Sandra Mills said she'd seen the girl too, looking in through her window, standing in her driveway, gone before she could reach her. All of them had seen the same girl. All of them described her the same way. Dark hair, 4 years old, wearing a white dress. I pulled up the photos from Emily Brennan's death investigation in 1983. There was one photo of Emily taken shortly before she died. Dark hair, white dress, 4 years old. I showed the photo to Holloway, Garrett, and Mills separately. All of them confirmed it was the same girl they'd been seeing, but Emily Brennan had been dead for 26 years. On September 17th, I got another call. A woman named Elizabeth Chen had reported a break-in at her house. The description was familiar. Nothing stolen, furniture rearranged, a photo left behind. I went to the house immediately. Elizabeth was in her 60s, retired, lived alone. I know this is going to sound crazy, she said as she let me in. But I think the little girl did this. What little girl? The one I've been seeing. She's been standing in my backyard for 3 nights. Last night I left the back door unlocked. I wanted to see if she was real, if she'd come inside. And did she? I don't know. I woke up this morning and found everything like this. The living room furniture had been moved. Not randomly, but deliberately arranged in a specific pattern. The couch, chairs, and coffee table formed a perfect square in the center of the room. In the middle of the square was a single photo. Emily Brennan in her white dress. Why did you leave the door unlocked? I asked. Elizabeth looked at me with tears in her eyes. Because I knew her. 30 years ago, I was Emily's babysitter. I was supposed to watch her the day she died, but I called in sick. If I had been there, she might not have wandered into that pond. I felt a chill run through me. You blame yourself for her death? I've blamed myself for 26 years, and now she's back. She's been watching me. I thought if I let her in, if I faced what I did, maybe she'd leave me alone. Did you tell anyone else about this? About being Emily's babysitter? No, I moved away after it happened. I couldn't face the Brennans. I've carried this guilt my whole life. I started checking backgrounds on the other victims. Richard Holloway had lived in the same neighborhood as the Brennans in 1983. He'd been 15 years old at the time. I pulled his school records and found something interesting. In the fall of 1983, just weeks after Emily's death, Richard had been sent to the school counselor for behavioral issues. The counselor's notes were brief but telling. Student exhibits signs of trauma. Refuses to discuss incident. Mentions seeing things that aren't there. Recommended for further evaluation. The further evaluation never happened. Richard's parents had refused, according to the records. They'd moved him to a different school the following year. I called Richard and asked him about it. "I don't remember much from that time," he said. His voice was quiet, strained. "After Emily died, I couldn't sleep. I kept having nightmares. I'd see her standing in places she shouldn't be. My parents thought I was making it up for attention." "What kind of places?" "In my room, at the foot of my bed, in the hallway, always just watching me. I'd wake up and she'd be there, and then she'd be gone. It went on for months." "Did you tell anyone what you saw?" "I tried. The counselor, my parents. Nobody believed me. Eventually, I learned to stop talking about it. The visions went away after we moved. Or I thought they did." "What do you mean?" "They came back. A few weeks ago, before the break-in. I started seeing her again, the same way I did when I was 15. Standing in my room, watching me, and then someone broke in and rearranged my furniture, and I knew it wasn't a coincidence." I made notes and moved on to Thomas Garrett. Thomas Garrett had been the Brennans' neighbor. His storage unit had contained photos from that era, but there was more to it than that. I found old property records showing that Thomas had sold his house in 1984, the same year the Brennans moved. He'd sold it for significantly less than market value, like he was desperate to leave. When I visited him to ask about it, he was reluctant to talk. "That was a long time ago," he said. "I don't like to think about it." "I need to understand what happened. Why did you leave so quickly after Emily's death?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because I couldn't live next to that pond anymore. Every time I looked at it, I saw her. That little girl, floating face down. I was the one who called 911 that day. I heard the screaming and looked over the fence, and there she was. That must have been traumatic. You don't understand. It wasn't just that day. It was after. For months, I'd hear splashing from the pond late at night. I'd go out to check, and there'd be nothing there, just still water. But I could swear I heard someone in there struggling." "Did you report this to anyone?" "Who was I going to tell? That I was hearing ghost sounds from a pond where a child drowned? They'd think I was crazy. So I sold the house and left, and I haven't been back to that neighborhood since." "Until someone stole your box of photos." "Yeah, photos I'd forgotten I even had. From block parties and neighborhood gatherings back in the early 80s. I don't know why anyone would want them." Sandra Mills had been Emily's preschool teacher. When I interviewed her, she was in her 60s, retired, living in a small house on the outskirts of town. "I remember Emily very well," she said when I asked. "She was a sweet child. Quiet, shy, but very bright. She loved to draw. Did you notice anything unusual about her in the weeks before her death?" Sandra's expression changed. "Yes, actually. She became withdrawn. She stopped playing with the other children. She'd sit by herself and draw the same picture over and over." "What was she drawing?" "A man, always the same man. Dark hair, standing near water. I asked her who it was, and she said it was the man who called her name. I thought it was an imaginary friend. I didn't realize." She trailed off, tears in her eyes. You couldn't have known, I said. But I should have. I should have told her parents. I should have asked more questions. Instead, I just let her keep drawing those pictures. And then she was gone. Do you still have any of those drawings? No. After she died, the school cleaned out her cubby. I assume they threw everything away, but I remember them clearly. The same figure, always near water, always watching. Every person who had experienced something strange had a connection to Emily Brennan. They had all been in her life when she died, and they had all seen or heard something that suggested Emily's death was more than a simple accident. But there was one more person I needed to talk to. One person who had been there that day and never spoke about it publicly. Officer Patrick Doyle, the first responder from 1983. I called him again and asked if I could visit him in person. He agreed, though he sounded hesitant. His house was a small ranch in a quiet suburb. He met me at the door, looking older than his years, worn down by decades of police work. "Come in," he said. "I've been expecting you to come back." We sat in his living room. On the mantel, I noticed photos of his family, his career. But there was one photo that caught my attention. It showed a younger Doyle in uniform, standing next to a police car. In the background, barely visible, was a white house with a backyard pond. "That's the Brennan house," I said. "Yes, that photo was taken about a week before Emily died. I didn't know it then, but I'd be back there soon, under very different circumstances. Tell me about that day. Everything you remember." Doyle took a deep breath. "I got the call at 4:17 p.m. Child in distress at 4521 Maple Street. I was 3 minutes away. When I arrived, there was a teenage girl performing CPR on a small body. Helen Caldwell, I later learned. She was crying, screaming for help." "Was Emily already dead?" "Yes. She'd been in the water too long. But Helen kept trying. She wouldn't stop until the ambulance arrived and the paramedics took over. Even then, she kept saying, 'I should have been faster, I should have seen her sooner.'" "What about the parents?" "Claire Brennan was in the house when it happened. She came running out when she heard the screaming. The father, Robert, he arrived about 10 minutes later. He'd been at work." "You said in your report that Robert kept saying she was supposed to be there. Can you elaborate on that?" Doyle looked uncomfortable. "Yeah, it bothered me then, and it still bothers me now." Robert stood there looking at his daughter's body, and instead of being surprised or shocked, he seemed resigned, like he'd known this was coming. "Did you push him on it?" "I tried, but he shut down. Said he didn't know what he was saying, that he was in shock, and I let it go. It was ruled an accidental drowning, and there was no evidence to suggest otherwise. But I've always wondered what? If maybe Robert knew something. If maybe he'd seen something in the days before that made him think Emily was in danger, but he didn't act on it, and then it was too late." I showed Doyle the drawings that had been found in Emily's grave, the ones showing a man watching near water. He stared at them for a long time. "These are new?" "Recent, yes, but made with materials from the 1980s. "That's impossible. I know, but they exist, and they suggest that Emily was trying to tell us something, that she saw someone watching her, someone who didn't help when she fell." Doyle set the photos down. "There's something I never put in my report. Something I saw that day that I couldn't explain." "What?" "When I was processing the scene, taking photos, documenting everything, I looked at the house next door, Thomas Garrett's house, and I saw someone in an upstairs window, just for a second. A figure, watching. I assumed it was Garrett, but when I asked him later, he said he'd been at work when it happened. He didn't get home until after the ambulance left. Could it have been someone else? There was no one else in the house. Garrett lived alone. But I know what I saw. Someone was watching from that window. And Helen Martinez? I dug deeper into her background. It took days of searching, but I finally found it. Helen Martinez's birth name was Helen Caldwell. In 1983, she had been a teenager living on Maple Street, right next door to the Brennans. She had been the one who found Emily in the pond. She had pulled Emily's body from the water and tried to revive her. She had screamed for help while performing CPR on a 4-year-old girl who was already dead. That trauma had shaped her entire life. She'd changed her name, moved constantly, never staying anywhere long enough to form attachments. And then, 26 years later, she'd come back to face what had happened. But someone, or something, had been waiting for her. I arranged to have all the victims brought in for interviews. I wanted to understand what they knew, what they'd seen, what connected all of these incidents. But before I could conduct those interviews, something else happened. On September 20th, Richard Holloway called 911. He was hysterical. "She's in my house," he shouted. "The girl, she's inside. She won't leave." Officers responded within minutes. When they entered Holloway's house, they found him in the living room, backed into a corner, staring at the furniture. The furniture had been rearranged again, but this time it wasn't random. The pieces formed a specific scene. It was arranged exactly the way it had been in the Brennan house in 1983. I knew this because I'd pulled the crime scene photos from Emily's death. The living room layout in those photos matched what was now in Holloway's house. Someone was recreating the Brennan home, piece by piece, memory by memory. But who and why? I spent the next week investigating every angle I could think of. I re-interviewed everyone connected to Emily Brennan's death. I reviewed the original case file a dozen times. I searched for anyone who might have a motive to torment these people. Nothing made sense. On September 28th, I got a break. The lab results came back on the photo album that had been buried at Emily's grave. They'd found fingerprints. Most of them were old, degraded, impossible to identify, but one set was fresh, and they matched someone in our database, Claire Brennan, Emily's mother. I called Claire immediately. "Mrs. Brennan, I need to ask you something. Have you been back to Montana recently?" "No," she said. "I haven't been there in years." "Why? Your fingerprints were found on evidence connected to this case." "That's impossible. I haven't touched anything connected to Emily's death since we moved away." "When was the last time you saw that photo album? The one with family pictures from the early 80s? There was a long pause. I threw that album away. After Emily died, I couldn't look at those photos anymore. I put it in the trash the day we moved out of the house. "Do you know what happened to it after that?" "No, I assumed the garbage collectors took it." But somehow, that album had survived. Someone had kept it for 26 years, and now they were using it to send a message. I decided to visit the old Brennan house on Maple Street. The current owners were a family named the Johnsons. They'd lived there for 15 years. "Have you experienced anything unusual?" I asked them. Mrs. Johnson hesitated. "What kind of unusual?" "Anything out of place. Strange occurrences. People coming around asking about the house's history." "Well," Mr. Johnson said, "there was a man who came by a few months ago. He asked if he could look at the backyard. Said he used to live here as a kid and wanted to see it again." "Did he give you his name?" "No, he seemed harmless, so we let him walk around for a few minutes. He spent most of the time looking at the spot where the pond used to be." "Where the pond used to be?" "Yeah, the previous owners filled it in. After what happened with that little girl, I guess nobody wanted it there anymore." "What did this man look like?" They described a man in his 30s, average height, dark hair. Nothing particularly distinctive. "Did he say anything else?" just that he remembered Emily, the little girl who died. He said she'd been his friend. I asked them to call me if the man came back. Then I pulled property records and tried to figure out who might have lived in the area in 1983 who would have been a child then. The list was long. Too long to investigate individually. On October 1st, I got another call. This time from a woman named Patricia Simmons. She said her son, David, had something to confess. I met with them at their home. David Simmons was 32 years old. He looked nervous, guilty. "Tell the detective what you told me," Patricia said. David took a deep breath. "I've been the one doing all of this. The break-ins, the rearranged furniture, all of it." I felt a surge of both relief and confusion. Why? Because of Emily. She was my best friend when we were kids. We lived 2 houses apart. I was 6 when she died. I saw it happen. "You saw her drown?" "I was playing in my yard. I saw her wander into the Caldwell's property. I saw her go toward the pond. I should have called out, should have told someone, but I didn't. I just watched. And then she fell in, and by the time I ran to get help, it was too late." He was crying now. "I've lived with that guilt my whole life. I should have saved her. I could have saved her." "So you decided to torment the other people who were there." "Not torment. Remind. All of us, we were there that day. All of us could have done something. The babysitter who called in sick, the neighbor who had the pond. The teacher who didn't notice Emily was struggling. The teenager who found her but couldn't save her. We all failed her. By rearranging furniture and leaving photos, I was trying to recreate that day, to make everyone remember, to make everyone face what happened. On the anniversary, I thought if we all remembered together, if we all felt the guilt together, maybe Emily could rest." "Emily is dead," I said. "She's not coming back. She's not haunting anyone." "But I've seen her," David said. "We've all seen her. The little girl in the white dress, that's Emily." I didn't know what to say to that. I arrested David Simmons for breaking and entering, theft, and harassment, but I knew the case wasn't closed because David didn't kill Helen Martinez. He admitted to everything else, but he swore he had nothing to do with Helen's death. And I believed him. The autopsy results for Helen came back the next day. Cause of death: drowning. But not recent drowning. According to Dr. Foster, the condition of Helen's lungs suggested she'd drowned days before where her body was found. "How is that possible?" I asked. "She was seen alive after she disappeared." I can only tell you what the evidence shows. The water damage to her tissues, the specific deterioration of her lungs, all of it indicates she drowned several days before death. That doesn't make any sense. I know, but that's what the evidence says. I went back to the cemetery, to Emily Brennan's grave. I stood there in the fading afternoon light, trying to understand. 7 people connected to Emily's death in 1983. All of them had experienced something strange in September 2009. All of them had seen a little girl who looked like Emily. David Simmons had orchestrated most of it, but not all of it. Someone else was involved. Someone who had killed Helen Martinez in a way that didn't make medical sense. I knelt down and looked at the grave marker. Emily Brennan, 1979 to 1983. Beloved daughter. And then I noticed something I'd missed before. There was fresh dirt at the base of the marker. Not from the hole that had been dug and filled in. This was different. I called the groundskeeper. "Has anyone been here recently? Doing work on this grave?" "Not that I know of. Why? The dirt here looks disturbed." He came over to look. "That's strange. We haven't touched this grave in years." I got permission to excavate. We dug carefully, not wanting to disturb the actual grave. 3 feet down, we found something. A small box. Child-sized. Like a treasure chest a little girl might keep. Inside were drawings, crayon pictures done by a child. They showed a house, a family, a backyard with a pond. And they showed something else. In every picture, there was a small figure in the background. A man, watching, always watching. At the bottom of the box was a note written in a child's handwriting. He was there. He watched me fall. He didn't help. Find him. My hands were shaking as I read it. This box hadn't been here in 1983. It was new. The paper was recent. Someone had buried this here within the last few weeks. But the handwriting was identical to samples we had from Emily's preschool work. I'd seen those samples in the original case file. A dead child's handwriting on recent paper. I showed the drawings to Claire Brennan over a video call. She looked at them and went pale. That's Emily's work. I'd recognize it anywhere, but that's impossible. These are new. Who is the man in the background? I asked. She studied the pictures. I don't know. Robert and I never noticed anyone watching her. If someone had been there that day, if they'd seen her fall and didn't help, I had the drawings analyzed. The crayon used was from a brand that hadn't been manufactured since 1985. The paper was from a notebook that went out of production in 1984. Somehow, these recent drawings had been made with materials from the 1980s. On October 10th, I got a call from the archives at the county records office. They'd been reviewing security footage from the break-in where Emily's death certificate was stolen. "We found something," the archivist said. "You need to see this." I went down to look at the footage. It showed a figure entering the records room at 2:17 a.m. on September 12th. They knew exactly where to go, pulling Emily's file from the shelves without hesitation. But when the figure turned toward the camera, the footage glitched. Just for a second. When it cleared, the figure was gone. "That's impossible," the archivist said. "The door didn't open. There's only one way in or out, and the footage shows it was closed the entire time. But the person just disappeared. Can you clean up the footage? Get a better look at who it was?" They tried, but every time the figure was about to be clearly visible, the footage glitched. Like something was preventing us from seeing who it was, or maybe what it was. I spent the next week following every lead, interviewing every person connected to the case. Nobody could explain the impossible elements, the fingerprints that shouldn't exist, the drowning that happened days before death, the drawings made with 30-year-old materials, the handwriting that matched a dead child's. On October 20th, exactly 1 month after Helen Martinez's body was found, I received a package at the police station. No return address, postmarked from Helena. Inside was a VHS tape. I found an old VCR in the evidence room and played it. The footage was grainy, old. It showed a backyard. The Brennans' backyard in 1983, I realized. The pond was there, visible in the corner of the frame. And then Emily appeared, running across the yard in her white dress, playing, happy, alive. The camera followed her. She was alone for most of the video, just a 4-year-old girl playing in her yard on a summer day. But then, at the 5-minute mark, something changed. Emily stopped playing. She turned and looked directly at the camera. Her expression changed from happy to confused, and then she started walking toward the pond, not running, not playing, walking with purpose like someone had called her. The camera panned slightly, and I saw him, a figure standing near the pond, in the shadows, barely visible, watching. Emily walked toward the figure. She reached the edge of the pond, and then she fell. No, not fell, she stepped into the water. Deliberately. The figure didn't move, didn't call for help, just watched as Emily went under. The video ended. I sat in silence, staring at the blank screen. Someone had filmed Emily Brennan's death. They had watched it happen and done nothing. And now, 26 years later, they'd sent me the proof. I sent the tape to the lab for analysis. They confirmed it was from 1983, based on the tape degradation and the technology used. The footage was authentic. But who filmed it? And why send it to me now? I went back to the beginning. I reviewed every statement, every piece of evidence, every witness account from 1983, and I found it. A small detail in Officer Doyle's original report that I'd overlooked. Neighbor reported seeing a man with a video camera in the area earlier that day. Subject identified himself as a family friend documenting the neighborhood. No further action taken. A man with a video camera on the day Emily died. I called Officer Doyle again. The man with the camera, do you remember anything else about him? Not really. It was 26 years ago. Why? Did he give you his name? If he did, I didn't write it down. He seemed harmless, just someone making home movies. Do you remember what he looked like? Anything at all? Doyle was quiet for a moment, thinking. Average height, dark hair, I think. Maybe in his 30s. Clean cut, presentable. He was polite, cooperative. That's why I didn't pursue it. Did he say whose friend he was? He said he was documenting the neighborhood for a historical project. Some kind of archive of suburban life in the 80s. It sounded legitimate enough. But you never verified it. No, it was before Emily's death, before anything suspicious had happened. Just a guy with a camera. We saw that kind of thing sometimes back then, before everyone had video cameras at home. I thanked him and started searching. Historical projects, neighborhood archives, anything that might have been happening in that area in 1983. I found several small projects, mostly amateur historians documenting local architecture and community life. But none of them had records of who worked on them, who filmed what. Dead end. Or was it? I decided to reach out to the local historical society. Maybe they had records of projects from that era. The director, a woman named Margaret Walsh, was in her 70s and had been involved with the society since the 1970s. A neighborhood documentation project in 1983, she said when I called. I don't recall anything like that being officially sanctioned by our organization. Could someone have done it independently? Possibly. People did all kinds of personal projects back then. But if it was meant to be historical documentation, we would have been contacted eventually to preserve the materials. We never received anything like that. What if it wasn't really a historical project? What if someone was using that as a cover? A cover for what? I don't know yet, but I'm trying to find out. Margaret was quiet for a moment. You know, there was something odd around that time. A man came to one of our meetings in late 1983, said he was interested in local history. He asked a lot of questions about specific families in the area, wanted to know about their backgrounds, how long they'd lived there. Do you remember his name? No, I'm sorry. He only came to 1 or 2 meetings and then we never saw him again. What did he look like? Dark hair, average build, very polite, very interested, but there was something about him that made me uncomfortable. The way he asked questions, like he was looking for something specific. Did he ask about the Brennan family? I don't remember. This was 26 years ago, but he was particularly interested in Maple Street and the surrounding area. I felt a chill, the same area where Emily died. I pulled the visitor logs from Oak Hill Cemetery. Everyone who came to Emily's grave had to sign in at the office. I went through 26 years of logs. Most entries were from the Brennans, visiting regularly until they moved away in 1984. After that, a few scattered visits from people who had known Emily. But starting in 2008, 1 year before all of this began, there were new entries. Someone signing in every September 15th, the anniversary of Emily's death. The signature was illegible, but they always listed their relationship to the deceased as friend. I showed the signature to a handwriting expert. She compared it to every sample we had from people connected to the case. No match. But then she noticed something. "Detective, this signature changes over time. Look at the entries from 2008 compared to 2009. The handwriting is similar, but not identical. Like the same person writing with their non-dominant hand, or deliberately trying to disguise their writing. So, someone has been visiting Emily's grave for years, hiding their identity. That's what it looks like." I decided to stake out the cemetery on September 15th, 2010. If this person kept to their pattern, they'd show up on the anniversary. I arrived at dawn and positioned myself where I could see Emily's grave without being obvious. I waited all day. At 4:17 p.m., exactly the time Emily had been pulled from the pond in 1983, someone arrived. It was a man, just as Doyle had described. Average height, dark hair, now graying at the temples. He walked directly to Emily's grave and stood there, head bowed. I approached, slowly, not wanting to spook him. "Excuse me," I said. "Can I ask what brings you here?" He turned to look at me. His eyes were dark, sad. "I'm visiting an old friend." "You knew Emily Brennan?" "Yes, a long time ago." "Can I ask your name?" He hesitated. For a moment I thought he might run, but then he said, "Daniel Porter." I ran the name through my database later. No Daniel Porter had lived in the area in 1983. No Daniel Porter appeared in any of the case files or witness statements. The man had lied about his name. But I'd gotten something even more valuable. I'd taken his photo with my phone, discreetly, while we talked. I showed the photo to everyone who had been connected to the case. Richard Holloway, Thomas Garrett, Sandra Mills, Elizabeth Chen, Officer Doyle. None of them recognized him. "He wasn't from the neighborhood," Holloway said. "I knew everyone on our street back then. This man was never there. But someone had been there with a video camera. Someone had filmed Emily's death. And someone had been visiting her grave every year for decades. I sent the photo to the FBI database, hoping for a match. Nothing. This man, whoever he was, had no official identity, or at least not one we could find. On October 25th, David Simmons called me from jail. He said he needed to tell me something. "I wasn't alone," he said. "Someone else was helping me. Someone who knew things about Emily's death that I didn't know." "Who?" "I never saw their face. We communicated through emails. They told me where to find the photo album, when to arrange the furniture, all of it. They said they wanted everyone to remember, to face what happened." "Do you still have the emails?" "They disappeared. I tried to find them in my sent folder, but they're all gone, like they never existed." I requested a forensic analysis of David's computer. The tech team found traces of deleted emails, but they couldn't recover them. Whoever had sent them knew how to cover their tracks. But they found something else: the IP address where the emails originated. It was from a library computer in downtown Helena. I went to the library and asked to see their records. They kept logs of who used which computer and when. The dates matched. Someone had used computer number 7 on the same days David received those mysterious emails, but they'd signed in using a guest pass. No name, no identification required. "Do you have security cameras?" I asked the librarian. "Yes, but we only keep footage for 30 days. These emails were sent months ago. Another dead end, or so I thought. The librarian, a young woman named Ashley, said, "Wait, I might remember something. There was a man who used that computer regularly around that time. Always the same computer, always during the evening shift." What did he look like? Average height, dark hair going gray, polite, quiet. He'd come in, use the computer for an hour or two, then leave. Always paid in cash for the guest pass. I showed her the photo of the man from the cemetery. Her eyes widened. "That's him! I'm sure of it." So the man who visited Emily's grave every year was the same man who had been sending David instructions. The same man who possibly had been documenting the neighborhood in 1983. The pattern was becoming clearer, but I still didn't understand what it meant. I went back through the VHS tape frame by frame. The figure standing by the pond, watching Emily walk toward the water. I enhanced the image as much as possible. The figure was too shadowy to identify clearly, but there was something else in the frame I'd missed before. In the corner, barely visible, was a reflection in the sliding glass door of the Brennan house. A reflection of someone holding a video camera. I zoomed in as much as the technology allowed. The reflection showed a man. Dark hair, average height. The same description we'd heard over and over, but his face was turned away from the reflective surface. All I could see was his profile, and even that was too blurry to identify. I sent the enhanced footage to the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. They studied it and sent back a profile. Subject appears to be male, 30 to 40 years old in 1983, making him 56 to 66 now. Comfortable with technology, as evidenced by use of video camera and later email correspondence. Methodical, patient, willing to wait decades to execute a plan. Likely has personal connection to victim or victim's family. Motivation appears to be focused on forcing witnesses to confront guilt related to victim's death. The profile fit what we knew, but it didn't tell us who he was. I decided to try a different approach. I went back to Claire Brennan and asked her about Robert's diary entries again. Robert mentioned seeing a figure in the shadows. Did he ever describe this person to you? Not really. He was convinced he was imagining it, that the stress of Emily's nightmares was getting to him. Did he ever take photos or videos of the yard, maybe trying to document what he was seeing? Actually, yes. He bought a video camera in August 1983. He said he wanted to film the yard, to prove to himself that there was nothing there. But after Emily died, he destroyed all the tapes. He couldn't bear to look at them. He destroyed them? Are you sure? Yes, I watched him do it. He smashed them with a hammer and threw them away. But someone had saved at least one tape, the tape showing Emily's death. Either Robert had missed one, or someone else had made a copy before he destroyed them. I asked Claire if anyone else had access to their house around that time. We had friends, neighbors. People came and went. This was before we became paranoid about locked doors and security systems. Anyone who might have had reason to copy those tapes? I can't imagine why anyone would want to. They were just Robert filming our backyard, looking for shadows that weren't there. Unless those shadows were real. Unless someone had been watching the Brennan house and Robert had accidentally filmed them. The thought sent a chill through me. On November 1st, 2009, I officially recommended closing the case. David Simmons had confessed to most of the crimes. Helen Martinez's death was ruled accidental drowning with unusual circumstances. The other incidents were attributed to David's psychological break related to Emily Brennan's death. The case was closed, but I knew it wasn't really over, because there were too many things that didn't fit. Too many impossible elements that couldn't be explained by a man having a breakdown and trying to force people to confront old guilt. The fingerprints that appeared on evidence after it was logged. the drawings made with materials from the 1980s, the videotape showing Emily's death, the figure that disappeared from security footage, Helen's drowning days before her death, the little girl in the white dress that multiple people saw. All of it pointed to something beyond a simple explanation, something I couldn't write in an official report because it would sound insane. I kept my own file, separate from the official record. I documented every anomaly, every impossible detail, and I kept investigating quietly on my own time. In December 2009, I went back to the cemetery on the 15th. Not September 15th, but December 15th, 3 months after Emily's death anniversary. I sat at her grave from sunrise to sunset, watching, waiting. Nothing happened. But at 6:47 p.m., just as I was about to leave, I felt it, a presence, like someone was standing behind me. I turned. Nobody was there. But when I looked back at the grave, there was something new, a small toy, a plastic duck, the kind a child would play with in a bathtub. It hadn't been there a moment ago. I picked it up. It was cold, wet, like it had been pulled from water. I took it back to the station and logged it as evidence, but I never put it in the official file. I kept it in my desk drawer. Every few months, I'd check on the people who had been affected by the incidents. Richard Holloway, Thomas Garrett, Sandra Mills, Elizabeth Chen. They all reported the same thing. The sightings had stopped. The little girl in the white dress was gone, but they all felt her absence, like something had been watching them and now it wasn't, like they'd been released from something. In March 2010, Claire Brennan called me. She'd been going through old family documents and found something. Robert kept a diary, she said. I never knew about it. I found it when I was cleaning out his things. Can you send it to me? She did. It arrived 2 days later. The diary was from 1983, starting in June and ending in September. Most entries were mundane. Work, family, daily life. But the entries in the weeks before Emily's death were different. June 1st. Emily has been having nightmares. She says a man is watching her. I've checked the house, the yard, everything. No one is there. June 15th. Emily won't go outside. She says the man is waiting for her. I don't know how to help her. July 3rd. The dreams are getting worse. Emily describes the same man every time. Dark hair, average height. She says he stands by the pond and calls her name. August 20th. I've started seeing him too, or I think I have. Movement in the shadows. A figure near the fence, but when I go to look, there's nothing. September 10th. Emily says she has to go to the pond, that the man needs her there. I've told her absolutely not. I've forbidden her from going near that part of the yard. September 14th. Tomorrow is the day. Emily is certain of it. She says the man told her tomorrow is when it happens. I don't understand what she means. I'm going to keep her inside all day. The final entry was September 16th, the day after Emily died. She was supposed to be there. That's what Emily had been trying to tell us. It wasn't a nightmare. It wasn't imagination. Someone had been calling her. Someone had been planning this, and we didn't believe her. I read the diary 3 times. Robert Brennan had known something was wrong. He'd seen the same figure his daughter had described, but he dismissed it as imagination, as childhood fears, until it was too late. The diary confirmed what I'd suspected. Emily's death wasn't entirely accidental. Someone had been there. Someone had called to her, had led her to the pond. The same someone who had filmed her death. The same someone who, 26 years later, had orchestrated events to make everyone remember. But who? I spent months searching. I interviewed everyone I could find who had been in that neighborhood in 1983. I searched through property records, employment records, school records. I found dozens of people who had lived nearby. Any one of them could have been the man with the camera, the figure in the shadows. But I couldn't prove it. I couldn't even narrow it down. In June 2011, almost 2 years after it all began, I received one final piece of evidence. A letter delivered to the station. No postmark this time. Hand-delivered. Left on my desk while I was out. The letter was short. Detective Whitman. By now you know that Emily's death was not an accident. You know that someone was there, watching, waiting. You know that 26 years later, that someone wanted everyone to remember. You want to know why. You want to know who. The truth is, it doesn't matter. The pattern has been broken. The guilt has been felt. The debt has been paid. Emily can rest now, and so can I. Don't look for me. You won't find me. Some questions are meant to remain unanswered. The letter was unsigned. The handwriting didn't match anyone in our database. I kept it in my desk drawer next to the plastic duck. But I didn't stop investigating. I couldn't. Over the next year, I followed every lead I could find. I tracked down every person who had lived in that neighborhood in 1983. I interviewed dozens of people, showed them photos, asked about a man with a video camera. A few remembered seeing someone like that. "Oh yeah," one elderly woman said. "He was around for a few weeks that summer. Said he was making a documentary. I thought it was for public television or something." "Did he tell you his name?" "No, or if he did, I don't remember." "Did he seem interested in any particular houses or families?" "Now that you mention it, yes. He spent a lot of time on Maple Street. I saw him there several times, filming houses, talking to people." "Did you see him after Emily Brennan's death?" "No. Come to think of it, I never saw him again after that. I assumed his project was finished. I contacted every television station, every film school, every documentary production company in the region. None of them had any record of a neighborhood documentation project in that area in 1983. The project had been a lie. A cover story to explain why a man was spending weeks filming a specific neighborhood, focusing on specific families. But why? What was he looking for? In September 2011, on the anniversary of Emily's death, I went back to the cemetery. I arrived early and waited, hoping the mystery man would return. He did. At 4:17 p.m., the same time as always, he appeared. Older now, moving slower, but unmistakably the same man. This time, I didn't approach him. I watched from a distance, documenting everything. I took photos. I recorded video on my phone. He stood at Emily's grave for exactly 17 minutes. Then he knelt down and placed something on the ground. He stood, looked around as if sensing he was being watched, and walked away. I waited until he was gone, then approached the grave. The item he'd left was a small wooden box, hand-carved, beautiful. Inside was a photograph I'd never seen before. It showed Emily Brennan, alive, happy, playing in her backyard. But in the background, barely visible in a shadow, was a figure. A man watching her. Underneath the photo was a note in the same handwriting as the letter I'd received. I was always watching. I saw everything. But I couldn't save her. Some patterns can't be broken, only completed. I sent the photo and note to the lab. The photo was authentic, from 1983. The handwriting matched the previous letter. But the most disturbing discovery came from the paper analysis. The note had been written recently, within the past few days. But the ink used was from a pen manufactured only in the early 1980s, a brand that had been discontinued for decades. How did someone write a new note with 30-year-old ink? I consulted with experts. They had no explanation. The ink had aged. It showed all the chemical markers of being decades old. But the paper was new, and the handwriting was fresh. It was impossible, but it existed. In December 2011, I received a call from Elizabeth Chen, Emily's former babysitter. She sounded frightened. "Detective, she's back, the little girl. I saw her again last night." "Where?" "In my backyard, just standing there, looking at my house. I called out to her, but she didn't respond. She just turned and walked away into the darkness." "Did you report this to the local police?" "What would I say? That I'm seeing the ghost of a child who died 28 years ago? They'd think I'm crazy." "You're not crazy, Elizabeth. Other people have seen her too." "I know. That's what scares me. If we're all seeing the same thing, if we're all experiencing the same pattern, then it means something, doesn't it? It means there's a reason this is happening." "What do you think the reason is?" "Guilt. We all failed her in some way. I was supposed to watch her that day, and I didn't. The others, they were there in her life, and they didn't see the danger. They didn't protect her. And now she's reminding us, or someone is using her memory to remind us." "Do you think it's the man? The one who filmed her death?" "I don't know. But whoever it is, they know exactly how to make us suffer. They know exactly what we're afraid of." In March 2012, I got a strange call from the evidence room. One of the technicians had been organizing old case files when they noticed something odd. "Detective Whitman, you need to see this." I went down to the evidence room. The technician showed me the box containing Emily Brennan's personal effects from the original investigation. "This box was sealed in 1983, she said. "We have documentation showing it hasn't been opened since then, but look inside." I put on gloves and opened the box. Inside were Emily's clothes from the day she died, her shoes, a small bracelet she'd been wearing, everything that had been logged in 1983, plus one thing that hadn't been: a small tape recorder, the kind used in the 1980s, and a cassette tape. "This wasn't in the original inventory," the technician said. "I checked. There's no record of this being collected from the scene." "How did it get here?" "I don't know. But the seal on the box hasn't been broken. It's impossible for someone to have added this without us knowing." I took the tape recorder and cassette to my office. I found an old player and loaded the tape. Static at first. Then a voice, a little girl's voice. "My name is Emily Brennan. Today is September 14th, 1983. Tomorrow I'm going to the pond. The man said I have to. He said it's important. He said things happen the way they're supposed to happen. I don't want to go, but I think I have to. Mommy and Daddy don't understand. They think I'm having bad dreams. But he's real. He's been watching me for a long time. He knows things about me. He knows things about all of us." There was a pause, the sound of someone crying softly. "I'm scared. I don't want to go to the pond. But he said if I don't, something worse will happen. Something bad for everyone. So I'm going to go. Maybe it won't be so bad. Maybe he's telling the truth and it's just something I have to do." Another pause. "If you're listening to this, if you find this after whatever happens, please tell Mommy and Daddy I love them. And tell them it wasn't their fault. It was supposed to happen this way. The man said so." The tape ended. I sat in silence, my hands shaking. Emily had known. She'd known she was going to die. Someone had told her, had convinced her it was necessary, and she'd made this recording the night before, a goodbye message. But how had the tape gotten into the evidence box, and why had it appeared now, almost 30 years later? I showed the tape to Claire Brennan. She listened to her daughter's voice for the first time in decades and collapsed in tears. "She knew," Claire said through her sobs. "She knew, and she didn't tell us. She tried in her way with her nightmares and her drawings, but we didn't understand. We didn't believe her. Who was the man she's talking about? I don't know. We never saw anyone. But Emily saw him. She talked about him. We thought it was imagination. Did Emily have a tape recorder? No, we didn't own one. This isn't ours. So someone had given Emily the recorder and tape. Someone had asked her to make this recording. The man who had been watching her. The man who had filmed her death. In June 2012, 3 years after the investigation began, I made a decision. I couldn't solve this case through normal means. Every lead ended in impossibilities. Every piece of evidence contradicted itself. I needed to think differently. I went back to the cemetery and sat at Emily's grave. I spoke to her, or to whoever might be listening. "I know you're out there," I said. "I know you've been orchestrating this. I don't understand why, and maybe I never will, but I need you to know that Emily's story is being told. People remember her, people carry her with them." The wind picked up, rustling through the trees. "If you want me to stop investigating, if you want me to let this go, you need to give me a reason. You need to show me that this isn't just cruelty, that there's a purpose to all of this suffering." I waited. Nothing happened. I was about to leave when I noticed something. On Emily's headstone, someone had placed a single white flower. It hadn't been there when I arrived. I looked around. The cemetery was empty, but the flower was fresh, recently placed. I picked it up and found a note underneath, written on the same old-style paper with the same impossible ink. The purpose was always remembrance. The pattern was always completion. 7 people forgot what they owed. 7 people have now remembered. The debt is paid. Let her rest. 7 people. I counted them. Elizabeth Chen, Richard Holloway, Thomas Garrett, Sandra Mills, Helen Martinez, Officer Doyle, and Robert Brennan himself. 7 people who had been in Emily's life. 7 people who in one way or another had failed to save her. And now, all 7 had been forced to confront that failure. Elizabeth had let the girl into her house, had tried to face her guilt. Richard had seen the rearranged furniture, a recreation of the day it happened. Thomas had his photos stolen, his memories unearthed. Sandra had the dollhouse disturbed, a reminder of the child she'd taught. Helen had died at Emily's grave, possibly by her own choice. Unable to live with what she'd seen, Doyle had been forced to revisit the case, to acknowledge what he might have missed. And Robert had died carrying the knowledge that he'd seen the danger but hadn't stopped it. The pattern was complete, and I was the witness to it all. The one meant to document it, to understand it, to tell Emily's story. And I stopped investigating. Not because I wanted to, but because I realized the letter was right. Some questions can't be answered. Some patterns can't be fully understood. The case remains in my files, officially closed, unofficially open. I still think about it. Late at night, when I can't sleep. I think about Emily Brennan, 4 years old, walking toward a pond because someone called her name. I think about the people who carried guilt for 26 years, who were forced to confront it in the strangest way possible. I think about the figure in the shadows, the man with the camera, the one who watched and did nothing. And I think about the little girl in the white dress, the one who appeared to remind everyone of what they'd lost, what they'd failed to prevent. Was she real? Was she a ghost? Or was she something else entirely, a manifestation of collective guilt, a product of suggestion and grief? I don't know. What I do know is this. Every September 15th, I visit Emily Brennan's grave. I bring flowers. I sit with her for a while. And sometimes, just sometimes, I feel like someone is sitting with me. Someone small. someone who forgives. The case file sits in my office at home. Box labeled 093317MC. Multiple incidents. Pattern unresolved. I open it occasionally. I review the evidence. I look at the photos, read the statements, study the timeline. And every time I see something new. Some detail I missed before. Some connection I didn't understand. The pattern is there. It's always been there. But I can't see all of it. Only pieces. Maybe that's how it's meant to be. Maybe some patterns aren't meant to be fully understood. Maybe some cases aren't meant to be solved. 6 months ago, I got a call from a detective in Oregon. They had a strange case. Multiple break-ins, nothing stolen, furniture rearranged. An old photo left at each scene. The photo showed a little girl, different girl than Emily, but around the same age. "Does this sound familiar?" the detective asked. I told them no. I didn't tell them about Emily Brennan. I didn't tell them about the pattern, because I don't think they'd believe me. And even if they did, I don't think it would help. Some patterns repeat. In different places, different times, different people. But always the same structure. Always the same message, remember. Face what you've done. Carry the weight. I wonder how many of these cases are out there. How many unsolved incidents connected to children who died too young, too tragically. How many people carrying guilt they can't escape. How many patterns we can't see because we're not meant to. Last week, I woke up at 3 a.m. No reason, just suddenly awake. I went to the window and looked out at my backyard. There was a little girl standing there. Dark hair, white dress, about 4 years old. She was looking up at my window. For a moment, we made eye contact, and I felt it. The weight of every unsolved case. Every question without an answer. Every pattern I couldn't complete. Then she was gone. I stood at that window for an hour, waiting for her to come back. She didn't, but I know she's out there, somewhere, watching, waiting. For what, I don't know. The case file remains on my shelf, 093317MC, pattern unresolved, and it will stay unresolved. Because some patterns aren't meant to be broken, they're meant to be remembered.